Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto was the only one who knew the shadow clone training secret. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. He still could not believe the things that had gone wrong during the exam, something that he and his team had been told would be simple to complete. Dosu Kanuta, with his team of Zaku Abumi and Kintsuchi, had entered the Chunin exams on the command of their village leader, Orochimaru, with the single mission of eliminating the last Uchiha within Konoha's walls. They had been informed that by working together they would have no problems dealing with Sasuke Uchiha, his teammates apparently having been unworthy of even being told of. With that in mind, trusting the tools and training they had been given for their task, the Otogaker team had arrived within Konohagakure with quite a lot of confidence. No one took any real notice of them, they were after all from a newly founded village with no real backing, compared to the 5 great shinobi villages. Their first mistake, Dosu would later admit to himself, was striking against Kabuto Yakushi in retaliation for his cutting remarks about their village. Not only had it been a childish thing to be angered over, but it also gave the whole room of enemy shinobi a chance to see his favorite tool at work. After that it had been one setback after another, starting with trying to kill Sasuke within the Forest of Death, only to learn Orochimaru had given him the cursed mark. If their leader wanted the Uchiha dead, why would he mark him? What all of Odo thought of as the best gift anyone in their village could be branded with. Still, they tried to complete their mission, no matter how many Konoha ninja came out of the woodwork to stop them. Well, as a team they may have their problems with one another, within Odo if one did not work perfectly with their team, it would because failures meant death within Otogaker. The Taijutsu expert with the freaky eyebrows, the team of losers, and even the pink-haired teammate had all fallen before Dosu and his team. Then Sasuke woke up and the shit hit the fan, the Uchiha having survived the implanting of the cursed seal, and more than happy to use it against the enemy ninja before him. Zaku foolishly spoke out against Sasuke, leading to the breaking of both his arms, before they were saved by the pink-haired teammate of the Uchiha, Dosu, more than willing to trade the scroll they carried, in order to save himself and his teammates. While he was not one to show it, as many in Odo were the same, he had grown to care for his teammates, as they had gone through many terrible events together. Sure, Zaku was easily angered, and Kin was a complete sadist, to Dosu they were the only people he felt close to in the entire world. After easily dealing with 2 weaker teams still within the forest, they managed to get the scrolls they needed in order to move on with the tournament and complete their mission, even though Dosu had grown to realize they were never meant to actually succeed in it. They had been used, Orochimaru for some reason wanting them to try and kill Sasuke, but end up losing to him and the power of the cursed seal. It was only after watching Zaku blow one of his arms off during his teammates' battle against the Abiram that Dosu realized they were mere pawns, easily disposed of in order to accomplish their leader's goals. It was while watching Kin being knocked out due to the cunning plan of the Nara that Dosu had been doing all he could not to cry out in anger at the betrayal he felt for all he and his team had done to please the man who had made them as strong as they were. In the end they were mere pawns used to get a hold of a better piece. Dosu had hidden his rage well, but had been more than happy to vent on his own battle with the Akimichi. It was lucky he had seen the boy in battle back during the Forest of Death, having since planned on how to defeat each of those he had battled in the forest. Should he meet up with them again in battle, his only regret was he had been too busy thinking of his leader's betrayal to give his teammate some suggestions. Not that it would have helped Zaku, but Kin at least could have won her battle if he had helped her out. Dosu now however had a clear goal. He would strike back against the snake who had tossed him aside, all for the Uchiha he had planned set up for. Dosu knew of the plans of the upcoming invasion, knowing one of the main players was the ninja Gaara, whom Dosu felt he could deal with. His sound would surpass the boy's sand with no problem, or would it? He had seen how quick the Taijutsu boy had been, how strong he had been, and all of it had been nothing to Gaara. This thought eventually made Dosu realize something that should have been obvious. If Gaara was being trusted to do so much damage during the invasion, then he was strong, and Dosu had been a mere pawn for his master's plans. There had to be more to Gaara, something Dosu and his team had not been informed of, just as they had not been informed of Sasuke's true skill, along with that of his blonde teammates. Sure, the Uzumaki boy hadn't seemed that impressive, but being able to make so many solid clones meant a lot of chakra, something they should have been informed of. Dosu now found himself standing before the Konoha hospital, knowing with a month ahead he couldn't do these things alone. He had been foolish to even think he could do anything against Orochimaru with the little skill and strength he had. He who had been so cocky to think he could fight and kill a sadistic Suna ninja who controlled sand with a mere whim. Dosu needed his team. He needed to at least know if they would side with him on his plans against Orochimaru. A part of him was actually worried they would deny him, they would choose the man who tossed them into the fire over him. He had never truly shown it, but he liked his teammates, and every shinobi needed a team to back them up. Dosu took a moment to collect himself, knowing that if he showed how truly worried and was he'd never hear the end of it, that's just how his team was. Dosu entered the room only for the single eye he had uncovered to widen in shock at the sight of Yoroi Akato, the masked sunglasses wearing genin on that bastard Kabuto's team, standing above the drugged form of Zaku, a syringe in hand to inject his teammate with something. With a narrowed eye, Dosu launched himself at the genin, who barely had the time to dodge the attack before it struck the back of his head, but it had been all Dosu had needed to activate the power of his melody arm. Yoroi managed to evade the hit, but the moment the Konoha ninja's feet hit the ground, Dosu's attack took effect. Yoroi quickly dropped to his knees as his hand moved to cover his mouth, resisting the urge to hurl much like his teammate had before the first test of the Chunin exam. The hell are you doing? Yoroi coughed out, recovering enough to speak. I'm here under Orochimaru-sama's orders. That gave Dosu pause, the Odo genin keeping himself from finishing off Yoroi in order to find out what was going on. What? My team was not informed of any of Orochimaru's spies being a part of the exam, Dosu stated, purposefully keeping him from calling the man Sama. Why you didn't need to know, you brat, Yoroi growled out in annoyance, glaring at Dosu from behind his sunglasses. Your team had one mission, and these two here failed it, which is why I've been sent to gather them to make use of them for Orochimaru-sama's plans. What? Dosu demanded, eye narrowing heatedly as he knew what happened to those who failed Orochimaru. What does he have planned for these two? It should be obvious, shouldn't it? Yoroi asked, managing a smirk as he slowly slid back to his feet, having recovered enough from the surprise attack to do so. Orochimaru-sama has no use for failures, they are to be used for the Edo Tensei. Dosu bit back a growl upon hearing Orochimaru's plans for his team, knowing now if he too had failed, he would have been dealt the same fate. Dosu however was not the only one who had heard the apparent commotion of himself and Yoroi having awakened Kin from her slumber, a bandage wrapped around her head in place of her usual Odo headband. Kin was staring at Yoroi in shock, having been awake since Yoroi first started cursing at Dosu. To hear the fate Orochimaru had set in place for her and Zaku, she knew her failure would end in death, but even still she did not want to die in such a way. Ah, you're up, Yoroi noted with a frown under his mask, drawing the frightened gaze of Kintsuchi as Yoroi produced the syringe from before. Don't worry, this will put you to sleep, just know that your life had some meaning to Orochimaru-sama's goals. He spoke before launching himself at Kin, unable to move too well still due to Dosu's jutsu. Kin wanted to move, but she was still in quite a bit of pain from her earlier defeat, add in the fact the hospital staff felt reason enough to strap her down, and she was unable to do anything for the incoming attack. I think not. Dosu growled out, launching himself at Yoroi, who this time wasn't as easily surprised. Yoroi managed to push himself back out of range of Dosu's melody arm, only to stumble onto his ass due to his still messed up balance. Dosu? Kin asked softly, a shocked look at her face as she looked at her teammate's back, wondering why he had attacked a comrade as he did. She and Zaku had failed, meaning they were of no use to Orochimaru or any other ninja from Odo. Failure meant death and they had long ago accepted that should any of them fail that none of them would care about it. Dosu spared Kin a light glance before returning his attention to the glaring form of Yoroi across from him. Really Kin, letting such lowly trash almost get the best of you, you truly are useless, he noted coldly before pulling his left arm, the sleeve fulling to reveal a kunai that he used to cut through the strap holding the girl's right arm. Kin blinked in surprise as the kunai was then handed to her before glaring at Dosu's back while forcing the tears of relief to leave her eyes. Fuck you. She managed to get out as she began cutting herself loose of the other straps, still feeling a bit dizzy from her head wound. If it had been me he would have already been dead by now. Dosu smirked lightly under his bandages, glad to see his teammate was back to herself. The idea of Kin actually crying was something he had never wanted to see, she was much too tough a girl for that sort of thing. Why you would betray Orochimaru-sama, Yoroi demanded, having finally managed to get back to his feet as his hands began to glow lightly, showing he was using the chakra-draining jutsu he had used earlier in his match against Sasuke during the exam. HMPH, he betrayed us first, Dosu stated firmly, pulling his right sleeve up to reveal his melody arm, just as Kin slipped into a standing position at his side, doing her best to hide the pain in her head. I don't suppose the doctors left you any of your senbon. Of course not, Kin muttered back with an annoyed look before allowing a cocky smirk come to her lips as she held up the kunai he had offered her, but against this weakling I can manage. You brats are pretty cocky, Yoroi mused, regaining a smirk as he suddenly made his move only instead of coming at the two of them, he made his way besides the still out of its Aku now, surrender or he dies. Both Odo ninja blinked before Dosu charged in, surprising Yoroi as he once more moved to dodge, hand quickly going to grab a hold of Dosu this time in order to drain some of his chakra. However Kin had also made a move, the Kinauchi waiting till Yoroi focused on Dosu to throw her kunai, her skill with senbon, giving her the skill needed to aim well enough to strike Yoroi right in his hand, the blade of the kunai ripping through muscle and tendons to end up on the other side of the spy's hand. Why you, bitch? Yoroi roared out in pain, all his focus moving to his damaged hand. Of course this gave Dosu the moment he needed to strike, slamming his melody arm into Yoroi's gut before activating it as he had against the Akimichi boy. In an instant Yoroi was on his back, the water within most of his body instantly being affected by the sound waves generated by Dosu's tool, knocking the traitor Konoha ninja out. Dosu let out a light sigh of relief, glad they had managed to deal with Yoroi so easily, though Dosu was aware Yoroi was most likely still in pain from his loss to Sasuke, and Dosu had gotten an early hit on the older genin at that start. All these facts made Dosu grit his teeth behind the bandages covering his face. He was nothing compared to Orochimaru, he was barely even a ninja from the way things were looking. Hey, Team Dosu heard from behind him, the now ex-Odo ninja turned to find an annoyed and tired-looking Zaku looking up at him from the bed. Keep it down, some of us are still trying to sleep. Well, excuse me from saving your sorry ass, Dosu said in an emotionless tone, though he was inwardly glad to see his teammate still had his sense of humor. So how much did you hear? I woke up at the part where you saved Kin fucking heroic moment by the way, Zaku said with a mocking smirk, before looking over to the light blushing form of Kin still fucking useless. Hey, at least I didn't blow my arms off you ass. Kin shot back with a glare, her blush becoming one of anger at his comment. I did not. They're still attached. Zaku offered up, raising his right arm to prove it only to wince in pain as he instantly put it back down. Fuck that hurts. You'll be lucky to be able to even mold chakra by the time you heal, Dosu commented simply, looking to the arm that had taken most of the damage, it being a miracle it hadn't been blown off. Please, it'll take more than this to stop me from one day beating your sorry ass, Zaku pointed out with a smirk towards Dosu before frowning as a concerned look came to his face. So, we're really fucked aren't we? It would seem so, a voice all three recognized spoke from the door, all three turning to find the smirking form of Kabuto Yakushi, wearing regulation Anbu gear with a matching mask in his right hand. Still, the least I can do is make your ends quick, we are after all comrades, he noted. All three Odo ninja instantly realizing the man before them was on the side they were just planning on leaving. Back when Dosu first checked into the hospital, Naruto Uzumaki was not a happy ninja at the moment, mostly because of one Niji Hyuga whom he was going to have to beat the crap out of in just a month. The other part of his annoyance was when he had sought his sensei for training, he had been nowhere to be found. Luckily Sakura had been able to give him some clue as to where Kakashi sensei had gone off to. That was the reason Naruto found himself being turned away by the nurse behind the counter, being barred from going into Sasuke's room. But I gotta get in there. Naruto argued, quite angry over not being allowed in his own teammate's hospital room. No one is allowed in there at the moment, Hokage's orders, the smug woman replied, somewhat glad she could put the boy down with the Hokage's own command. Before Naruto could retort, Kakashi entered the room, having just left Sasuke's room after dealing with the apparent traitor Kabuto Yakushi, whom he assumed would be long gone from the area by now. Naruto, quiet down, Kakashi sighed, wondering once more why his student had to be so loud all the time. Ninja in general were supposed to be quiet. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto instantly called out, not seeming to have heard his sensei's suggestion on silence. We were told we have a month to prepare for the next part of the exams, and Ina. Let me stop you right there, because I'm well aware of what you're going to ask me, Kakashi interrupted, having already planned ahead for this scenario after Naruto's lucky win against Kiba earlier in the day. I can't train you, I have other business to attend to for the month. What? Naruto said with a shocked expression, before narrowing his eyes in anger as he instantly guessed the reason. I get it. You're going to train Sasuke aren't you? Kakashi sighed once more, wishing Naruto wasn't always such a hassle to deal with. Yes he said, before quickly continuing before the blonde genin could start to rant at him, but I've found someone better to teach you, someone who can teach you how to better control your chakra. That's it. Naruto interrupted again, Kakashi narrowing his single showing eye in annoyance at his student being so hard to deal with. Kakashi-sensei, I'm facing Niji Hyuga, the guy who was the Sasuke of last year's graduating class. Just learning to control my chakra is not going to be enough, even more so with that weirdo taijutsu of his. Kakashi once more sighed, realizing he was going to have to say something he had been holding back on, but Naruto needed to come to terms with the truth of things. You're right, it's not, Kakashi stated plainly, Naruto looking surprised by his sensei's tone. Chakra control alone is, well, something you do need to learn, not going to be enough to defeat Niji Hyuga. Then, why are you? Because you only have a month Naruto Kakashi interrupted this time, single eye narrowed seriously as he explained his reasoning, a month to get strong enough to defeat a genin that has not only had a year to practice, but is also a member of the elite Hyuga clan, and you Naruto only defeated Kiba due to a fluke. Naruto stood there in shock for a moment before glaring heatedly at his sensei, while recalling his fight against Kiba, as he had only won because of a fart to the Inuzuka's face. Why yeah, but still. Naruto tried to argue, only to once more be silenced as Kakashi held his hand up. Even if I myself put all my focus onto you alone for this whole month, there is nothing I can teach you to win. What I am trying to have you learn is the skills you can use in the future," Kakashi explained, calming down a bit as he figured Naruto would understand his reasoning on this. "I'm not telling you to give up, do your best, but you cannot win. So it's better you focus on things that will help you with the next exam." Naruto looked to the ground in anger, once more recalling all the insults aimed at him, being called dead last, dope, moron, and of course that by both his fellow classmates and civilian alike over the years. He recalled how Neji had spoken to him after actually attempting to kill his own cousin, preaching about fate. Naruto had been so ready to shove the bastard's words back down his throat, and now he was being told there was no way he could win. "Now, as I was trying to tell you, I've found some," Kakashi began to continue, only to blink in surprise as Naruto turned his back to him and began making his way. "Naruto, where are you going?" Naruto froze, hands clenched into tight fists before he turned around, glaring at Kakashi fiercely. Kakashi was quite surprised, having never had such a look aimed at him by his blonde student before. "Take your instructor and shove him up your ass," Naruto stated bluntly, before turning around and stomping out of the hospital. "I'll train myself and kick not only Niji's ass, but Sasuke's too," he called back as the hospital doors slammed shut behind him. Kakashi lightly winced, realizing he might have been a little too hard on Naruto, though his choice in arrangements was mostly due to Sasuke needing to be hidden away from Orochimaru for the month mainly. The other fact was Sasuke was going against a deranged psychopath like Gaara, while Naruto was being set up against a fellow Konoha shinobi. While Neji might be ruthless, he wouldn't actually attempt to kill Naruto like Gaara would be to Sasuke. Still, Kakashi could have used a little more tact in dealing with his blonde student. Perhaps once the exams were over, he could help Naruto learn his elemental affinity and get some C-rank jutsus for him. "I didn't expect him to be so angry, though I can see why," the voice of Naruto's would-be instructor spoke, the sunglasses-wearing Ibisu stepping out from where he had been waiting to be introduced. "Well, I admit Uzumaki-san has a lot to learn. Did you really need to inform him of his chances like that?" "I thought it better he not get his hopes up," Kakashi admitted with a frown hidden by the mask he always wore, before turning to look back to Ibisu. "Let him simmer down a bit before trying to teach him anything. He does still need better chakra control." "Of course," Ibisu said with a nod. "Good luck with you and Uchiha-san." Kakashi nodded back, before forming a single seal as he vanished with a swirl of leaves, leaving Ibisu to himself. As the sunglasses-wearing Jonin mentally planned on how to get Naruto to accept his training, he was unaware of the events going on outside of the hospital. Naruto slammed the hospital doors behind him as hard as he could, quite pissed off at how his attempt to get training had ended up. To think his own sensei didn't believe in him. All that bull about not being able to beat Neji with a month of training. If that was true, there was no way Sasuke would be able to beat Gaara either. The guy who beat bushy brows to a pulp when said Taijutsu specialist was able to defeat Sasuke easily at the start of the exams. But of course he was Sasuke, meaning he would always be a genius who could win with his thieving eyeballs. "I don't need sensei, I'll become strong all on my own," Naruto stated loudly in the middle of the currently empty street. "After all, I'm gonna be Hokage, dad." "Move it, dumbass." Naruto blinked at the voice coming from above, looking up while trying to recall where he had in fact heard said voice, only to get a foot to the face, sending him reeling onto his back as three figures landed around him. One though was in fact on him. Naruto shook his head, his face currently bearing a sandal print on it, before he glared at the person who landed on him. "What's the big idea?" he demanded angrily, before blinking in shock, followed by a glare aimed up at the people around him. "Why you guys?" "Ah, it's the Uchiha's teammate," Dosu noted from his spot on Kin's right, the girl being the one to land on him, while Zaku, whom was on her left, had yelled down at him. "I thought I recognized that disgusting orange color. What part of move didn't you understand?" Zaku asked with an annoyed look, while being glad it was his arms and not his legs that had been fucked up as the drop from their room had been a long one. "Who cares, you morons?" Kin hissed at her teammates, pointing back up at the window they had dropped from. "That glasses-wearing freak is still up there," she said, before instantly jumping off of Naruto and making a run for it through an alleyway. Both her teammates instantly followed, Dosu even stepping onto Naruto's stomach while doing so. "Oof." Naruto gasped out, holding his stomach in pain as he glared after the Oto Genin. Wait. "Get back here." he gasped out, forcing himself to his feet before giving chase. The Oto ninja were supposed to have some connection with the Orochimaru guy that attacked them during the second exam, at least that's what he had managed to overhear Sakura talking to Sasuke about when they thought he wasn't listening inside of the forest. He was aware they were keeping something from him, something about that weird hickey on Sasuke's neck, and he figured the best way to find out was to get them to tell him. Plus after the crap they just pulled, he was eager to beat up all three of them. While Naruto was thinking to himself, the form of Kabuto had launched out of the window onto the nearest building, having placed the Anbu mask he had stolen back onto his face to keep attention off of him. The spy had thought it pretty genius to grab the two Odo genin after escaping Kakashi, quite certain the one-eyed Jonin wouldn't think Kabuto would stick so close after making his escape. His plan had been to assist Yoroi in grabbing the then drugged genin and taking them to Orochimaru in order to be used for his plans for the finals. He had not expected to find Yoroi dead and a single uninjured member of the squad in the room, but then again, it was the unexpected things in life that made things fun. Kabuto continued the hunt, watching the retreating genin with a smirk hidden by his mask. "Run, little ones," Kabuto spoke to himself, glad he finally had an outlet for his bloodlust. "Just make sure to find somewhere I can stretch my legs out. Fuck this shit." Zaku yelled out as he and his team finally found a place they figured would be safe to hide out at. The 14-year-old genin panting for breath by the time they found an unused training ground that thankfully had lots of trees to hide them from sight. "Are you really that out of shape?" Kin asked him with a mocking smirk before wincing as she held her head, her adrenaline dying down as the pain of her head injury finally hit her. I have the right, damn it." Zaku yelled back at her, quite eager to finally get some things off his chest. "I just spent how many fucking days running through a forest with ninja all eager to kill me. I was bitten by a fucking pink-haired bitch. I had my arms broken by the emo Uchiha, and finally I had my fucking arms almost blown completely off my body." Zaku ranted, before adding one more thing, "Oh, and now I'm being hunted by a glasses-wearing freak who apparently also works for Orochimaru who wants to fucking kill us." All in all a bad time, Dosu felt the need to add, giving Zaku a half-lidded look with his single showing eye. "Feel better, you whiny bitch." "Fuck you," Zaku stated first, glaring lightly at his teammate before smiling, "and yes, I feel much better except about my arms, they fucking hurt." "That's okay, I am a medic," the voice of Kabuto spoke, causing all three to look in shock at the nearby open clearing where Kabuto was standing, once more removing his mask to show his cocky smirk. "Why don't you come here and let Dr. Kabuto make all the pain go away?" "Cause that doesn't make you seem like a pedophile," Zaku stated with a forced smirk, quite aware though they were pretty screwed as he couldn't use his arms to mold chakra, let alone his ultimate weapon. Dosu stepped up to bat, Kin sticking beside Zaku as he couldn't defend himself at all at the moment. "Don't think you can defeat us," Dosu spoke firmly, his eye narrowed in determination as he held his melody arm up. "Don't forget how easily we dealt with you before Yakushi." "Ah yes, that was a fun way to introduce yourselves by the way," Kabuto said mockingly, lightly pushing his glasses up further onto his nose, before smirking in a manner that made Dosu recall the snake the man before them worked for. "But don't think I'll let you do something like that again," Kabuto stated firmly, before letting his killing intent loose upon the three ninja. Dosu tensed up, forcing himself not to back down as behind him, his team tried to do the same, Zaku biting his bottom lip to force himself to calm down, which was not working as his knees were shaking in fear, just as Kin was doing all she could not to try and make a run from it. Who the hell are you?" Dosu gritted out, aware the man before them was not the weakling they had assumed he was before. "Me? I'm Orochimaru-sama's number 2, Kabuto laughed darkly, quite aware everyone assumed Kimimaro was as Kabuto had been hiding out in Konoha, "and you little brat. You're dead," he stated before drawing a single shuriken and launching it forward. Dosu gritted his teeth, moving to dodge as best he could only for his eye to widen in horror as he realized he wasn't the target. "Zaku. Kin. Move." Dosu called back as he turned, only then seeing the freaked-out state both his teammates were in. Zaku cursed, unable to force his legs to move as Kin was so out of it, she didn't even seem to notice the incoming shuriken. Which of them it was aimed at didn't matter a moment later though. "Page shuriken no jutsu." Kabuto called out as he ran through the needed hand seals, the one shuriken bursting into more than enough to either kill or severely harm the two genin. Dosu moved to intercept, only to suddenly have Kabuto in his path, the glasses-wearing spy, sending a hard kick into Dosu's chest. "Ah!" Dosu cried out in pain, the hit having been a lot harder than he expected the supposedly weak spy to pull off, it sending him rolling onto the ground before he ended up on his chest. It was then he heard the thunks of the shuriken, his eye widening in fear as he looked up only to blink in surprise. Kabuto stared at his opponent's look before turning himself to see what was wrong only to blink in surprise himself. Where the dead bodies of Zaku and Kin should have been was nothing, not a single shred of either of them. "What in the he?" Kabuto began, only to be suddenly hit with an surprise attack from a tree from above, followed by orange blurs, hitting him higher and higher one after the other. "Uzumaki." A familiar voice that made Kabuto's eyes widen, wondering what he was doing there. Just then Kabuto came face to face with the person in question, Naruto Uzumaki glaring hatefully as he sent the last kick down onto Kabuto's chest. "Naruto Renden." Naruto cried out, the final strike sending Kabuto sailing down to the ground below before crashing into it. Dosu stared in surprise, wondering just what the hell just happened. It was only then that he felt himself being helped up. Dosu looked to find it was Kin at his side. "How?" he asked, still trying to figure out how she was alive. He tackled us to the ground at the last second, Kin admitted with an angry frown on her face, quite pissed off she had almost been killed so easily. Never thought I'd be glad to see so much orange. Hey. Naruto called out from where he had landed, his clones having already dismissed themselves after beating Kabuto down. What is it you've got against orange? Where's Aku? Dosu asked, ignoring the blonde for the moment as he was more concerned about his team, not that he'd admit it, or else they might actually think he cared. I hit him, Kin replied with a shrug, before smirking happily. The blonde hurt his arms quite a bit when he tackled us, plus I figured it'd be best to keep him out of the way with his current condition. Good, fall back to him and find some place to hide out for now, Dosu informed her, earning a confused look in return. Once I manage to deal with the matter here, I'll catch up to you. Fine, just don't go out like trash and die, Kin replied with an annoyed tone, turning to leave, only to give him one last look. If you die I won't cry for you, she stated firmly, before taking off. I know, Dosu said softly, resisting the urge to look back and watch her head off. Once more with that promise, a part of him was sure if he died, they would keep it two at least around each other. Stop ignoring me. Dosu sighed in annoyance as Naruto's yell ripped him from his thoughts, before looking to Naruto in order to figure out just why he had decided to help them out, only to suddenly launch himself at Naruto, melody arm held ready. Naruto gained a freaked out look, wondering if the guy was really going to attack him after he had just saved his teammates. Naruto had been chasing the three, though he had been far behind them after recovering from being landed on as he had. He had arrived only a while after Kabuto had, just as the glasses-wearing traitor, claimed to be Orochimaru's number 2 guy. Naruto had been shocked, the idea of Kabuto, whom had helped them pass the second exam, was working with Orochimaru the whole time. Naruto had been about to jump out and take Kabuto on right then, and there only to see him attacking the mummy guy's teammates while they were stunned. While he hated the three, mostly due to what he had learned they had done to Sakura while he had been knocked out, they seemed to be at odds with Kabuto over something, and maybe if he helped them out, they would tell him what he wanted to know. Wait. Naruto called out, trying to stop Dosu from attacking him, before bracing himself for the pain, only to blink in surprise, as Dosu swept past him, blocking the incoming kunai that had been thrown at his back. What? Pay more attention to your surroundings, Dosu stated plainly, pulling his arm back down, while keeping his eyes on the still smoking crater where the kunai had been launched from. Our opponent isn't down yet. Alright thanks, Naruto said, turning around to stand side by side with Dosu, for saving me and all, he said, unsure how he felt about actually having to thank one of the guys who had hurt Sakura. I was merely returning the favor for what you did for my useless teammates, Dosu replied blankly, however I would appreciate it immensely if you continue to assist me in dealing with the spy. Well, it seems you two are becoming friends, Kabuto laughed as he finally stepped back into view, seeming perfectly fine, the stomach area of his clothing having an imprint from where Naruto had struck. Losers are more prone to work together I suppose. Naruto growled at the insult, before pointing accusingly at Kabuto. Kabuto, why are you working with that snake team? Naruto demanded, I thought you were one of the good guys. A leaf ninja. You even helped us pass the second exam. It was more than likely to get Sasuke into the finals, Dosu spoke up, drawing Naruto's attention to him. Dosu resisted the urge to groan, wondering why the blonde would take his eyes off the enemy. Orochimaru wanted to see Sasuke pass and grow stronger, I'm unsure why, but it has something to do with the cursed seal he gave the Uchiha. Cursed seal? Naruto asked, before his eyes widened, recalling the hiki Sasuke had on his neck. Is that what it is? I think that's enough, Dosu, Kabuto said with narrowed eyes, not liking his ex-comrade going around telling things that should be kept secret. Now be a good little genin and die for me you too, Naruto, he said as he regained a smirk, his right hand starting to glow lightly as he activated his chakra scalpel. Damn, Dosu cursed, recognizing the ability from seeing one of the medical ninja back and Odo using it. Keep out of the range of his right hand, if he hits you with it you're done. Got it, that's why I have my bunshin. Naruto replied with a smirk, his hands moving into a familiar seal, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He called out, instantly forming 20 clones that appeared all around Kabuto. Kick his ass. Naruto called out, sending each of his clones into battle. Kabuto smirked to himself as he let the Bunshin charge in before whipping into action. As the first one neared he merely stepped back before letting his right arm tear through its lower back. As it poofed out of existence he let the next two charges into from both sides, Kabuto leaping into the air before slamming both legs back down upon both their heads, taking them out as well. After that another two moved in, one aiming a strike at his back as the other went at his front. Kabuto did a fully rotation, slamming his scalpel through the one in front, before using his momentum to take out the one behind him, before fully ending up facing where he began. It was here the re-aiming clones realized that such tactics wouldn't work, so they drew their fake kunai and shuriken, and began launching them at Kabuto. Kabuto bit back a remark at this lame tactic, merely launching himself at the nearest 5 Bunshin, while easily evading the crappy aim of the Naruto copies. In a matter of seconds he arrived, slamming a knee into the closest one, before following it up with a quick hit from his right arm to the two on his right. The remaining two held the kunai they had been using in a reverse grip, one moving in with the other right behind it. As the first one went to slash, Kabuto ducked it, throwing his right arm into its chest, before continuing on as he used the dismissed clone smoke to hide his attack on the last one until the last second. It was here that Kabuto turned around, facing the remaining 10 or 8 it seemed as he could only see 8. Two of the clones suddenly launched Fuma shuriken at him, Kabuto smirking as he easily dodged each one. Poof. Kabuto tensed at the sound, turning around quickly only to find two fists slamming into his face, only to be replaced by a log. The two clones whom had transformed into shuriken stared in shock, wondering where Kabuto had gone, only to hear the sudden dismissals of the other 8. They looked over, finding Kabuto in the center of where they had been, a mocking smirk on his face, as he pushed his glasses back up the ridge of his nose, they having lightly slipped during the whole attack. Well, that was quite the warm-up, Kabuto noted mockingly, before holding his right hand up in a familiar seal, Katsu. The two clones didn't have a moment to react before the explosive notes he had left on the log exploded, taking the last of them out. Kabuto hummed happily to himself, before turning to face the glaring but obviously nervous Naruto, along with the equally troubled Dosu. Deciding to mess with them both a bit, Kabuto rose his right hand up and gave a bring it motion with his fingers. Naruto grit his teeth, finding himself feeling the same as when he had faced both Zabuza and Orochimaru, Kabuto's actions even somewhat reminding him of how easily Kakashi had been able to deal with him during their graduation exam so long ago. Could it be that Kabuto was Jonin level? Dosu had watched, his single eye capturing all he saw while memorizing it for further use. It was one of his best skills, being able to easily analyze and access his opponent's strengths and weaknesses, but with Kabuto, he found almost nothing he could exploit, not with his skill set at least. Kabuto frowned at this, finding both genin seemed too intimidate to do anything against him at the moment. It was a shame, he was actually hoping to mess with them both a bit, but if he took too long someone might come upon them, plus he still had to hunt down Kin and Zaku for Orochimaru's jutsu. With a sigh he launched himself forward, smirking lightly as both genin quickly shifted into fighting stances, glad they at least were still willing to fight back. Pain. Nkakuk no jutsu. Kabuto had seconds to push his foot back against the ground, launching himself back before the large ball of fire struck his side. Kabuto turned with a quite unhappy glare towards the attacker, only to be forced to draw a kunai out with his left hand to block the incoming shuriken, however missing one that cut into his right leg, making him wince slightly. Kabuto's attacker then moved in front of both Naruto and Dosu, hand set up in a familiar seal Naruto spammed constantly. Naruto blinked, unsure what had just happened before looking to the man in front of him only to point in shock, "Why, you're that closet perv," he called out. Ibisu fought the urge to face plant, an annoyed blush coming to his face as he recalled what Naruto had forced him to go through the last time they met. "Why you be quiet about that?" Ibisu spoke loudly, eyes focused on Kabuto still. "Is that any way to thank your rescuer?" "Thank you, though I seriously doubt you're here for my sake," Dosu spoke up, aware due to Ibisu's attire he was at least Jonin in ranking, meaning their luck had just went up immensely. Ibisu quickly spared Dosu an uncertain look before returning his full focus onto Kabuto. "You're quite right about that. I'm however trusting the fact you are standing against Yakushi and standing beside Uzumaki-san that you're on our side," Ibisu reasoned. "However, I will require you not to try and flee the area as the Hokage will want to have a word with you and your teammates." "And you think I'm going to let that happen?" Kabuto asked, regaining his cocky smirk as he recalled all he knew of the special Jonin before him, quite sure he could deal with Ibisu and get away without too much trouble. "HMPH, I don't even need to worry about you," Ibisu said with an assured tone as he lightly pushed his sunglasses up the bridge of his nose, as Kabuto was prone to do. "I've been flaring my chakra for some time now, it won't be long till backup arrives." Kabuto mentally cursed, quite aware if even one other Jonin showed up he would have almost no chance of getting out of there unscathed. This was not good, as Orochimaru would be quite unhappy to learn that not only had he failed, but the Hokage had the sound genin in hand to question about the upcoming invasion. However, Kabuto was not getting caught over three brats. With one last glare Kabuto quickly withdrew a smoke pellet before throwing it down, shrouding the area in smoke so he could make his escape. "HMPH, coward," Ibisu stated, though he was inwardly glad Kabuto had left without trying anything. While Ibisu was sure he could handle the traitor long enough for the backup to arrive, he was unsure if he could protect Naruto or the Odo ninja at the same time. With a sigh he turned towards both Gen and the Hokage. "Will want to see both of you, this needs to be explained," he stated, before focusing his gaze on Dosu. "I will be forced to make you go if needed." "Hey, you don't need to talk to him like that," Naruto stated loudly, earning a surprised look from Ibisu and Dosu for that. "He's not with Kabuto or Orochimaru, at least not anymore," Naruto explained, before looking to Dosu warily. "Right. "No, my team and I no longer want anything to do with Orochimaru or his ilk," Dosu replied, recovering from his moment of shock, finding himself confused about the blonde's reaction to Ibisu's words and strangely appreciative, which was not a feeling he was used to. Dosu returned his gaze to Ibisu. "I will go without any trouble, merely allow me to gather my teammates, and I shall speak with your Hokage. I have a deal to offer him," Dosu finished, allowing himself to smirk under his bandages. If he was a mere pawn to Orochimaru, it was time to show the bastard of a snake could do even to a king. It was cold, it was always cold. He wasn't even sure what the name of the land he lived in was called, he was only 7 after all, and his parent hadn't gotten around to explaining such matters to him before he lost them. Since he had no other family members he was aware of, he was left to his own devices. Barely able to get food, barely enough to get water, and barely enough to replace the bandages he needed to keep his face covered. He blankly watched from his hidden position above, the two men walking with food in hand as they spoke to one another, talking of some person they had ripped off a few roads back. All that did was let him know they had some ryo for him to get his hands on. He waited patiently in the tree, not moving a muscle till he was sure it was the right time to strike. His single eye searched both men, trying to locate what he could use from their persons, before he instantly locked onto the weapon, lightly poking out from the one of his left's pouch. Step by step they neared him, unaware he was there at all until the last moment. Effortlessly he dropped onto the left one, knocking him down onto the ground hard with his body weight. In a matter of seconds he had his hand on the weapon, recalling it was a kunai, a ninja weapon. Before either man could fully comprehend what was going on, their reflexes in reaction to him being quite slow, he swung the blade, ripping it through the first man's throat, making sure to cut as deep as he could, so the man never recovered. The man gurgled out in agony as blood poured from his throat, eyes wide in terror as he held his neck, as if that would be enough to save his life. The other man was also in shock, but he now was aware enough to deal with the young boy who had murdered his partner. With a roar he threw a punch at the boy, whom had not only just turned around to face him. The boy had seen the way the man moved, already having calculated the reach of the man, as well as how long it took him to react to his own quickly movements. The boy ducked under the punch, pushing himself forward as quickly as he could, before leaping up, stabbing the kunai into the man's neck instead of cutting as he had the first. This of course gave the now dying man the chance he needed to send a punch with his other arm into the boy's chest, knocking him back onto the ground as he moved to pull the kunai out, which only killed him faster. The boy narrowed his only showing eye at the man as he tried to prolong his life, holding his hand over the single wound. Unlike the first one, he might be able to hold on for a bit longer, but he didn't feel like waiting. He looked around before noticing the large rock with a somewhat spiked point at one end. He picked it up, moved behind the currently freaking out man before slamming the rock as hard as he could against the back of his head. Again and again and again he did so, even as the man lay bleeding on the ground and unmoving. He just had to be sure. A few minutes of this and he stopped, his hands, clothing, and even the bandages on his face having blood coating them lightly, the splatter from the man's head having reached that far from the force of the blows. The boy stared before dropping the rock as he simply began digging through the men's pouches and pockets. The good haul of ryo, enough for a few meals and a new roll of bandages. The boy also reclaimed the kunai, figuring such a tool would be most helpful in the future as it had this time. After wiping the blade clean on the first dead man's clothes, the boy rose to his feet, making his way down the road to the nearest village so he could use his newly gained wealth. The boy didn't get 5 steps before he felt the eyes of a predator on his back, eyes unlike those of the 2 men he had just murdered. He slowly turned around, his eye narrowed at whatever had snuck up behind him, only to find a man. The man with the eyes of a snake. That was very well executed, boy, impressive for one so young and lacking in training, Orochimaru spoke with a sick grin on his lips, having enjoyed what he had seen. However, boy, surely you tire of being forced to survive, gaining meager scraps at a time. For your troubles come with me, and I can give you not only a home, but the power and skills needed to never suffer such as you have again. The Nukenin offered with a light laugh that sent shivers down the boy's spine. Well, do you accept? I, Dosu replied simply, staring back into the firm gaze of the old man sitting in front of him. The special Jonin Ibisu, who it turned out was not a full Jonin as Dosu had assumed from his attire, had allowed both Dosu and Naruto to go gather kin and Zaku before meeting with the Hokage. Both his teammates were currently being held in another room with Anbu guards, while he and Naruto had been sat before the Hokage to explain what had happened with Kabuto Yakushi. Dosu himself had just finished explaining his breaking away from Itagakure and Orochimaru with it, which had also meant explaining the mission they had been sent for in the first place. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Sandaime of Konohagakure, stared firmly at the young ex-Odo ninja, sitting beside a boy he thought of as one of his own, a boy whose luck of course had gotten him involved in the battle between a spy and a group of traitors to his wayward student. Of course, this was Naruto Uzumaki, the mere fact he was in Uzumaki explaining all it needed to in the matter. Still, Hiruzen found it strange to see the young blonde seeming so civil with the bandaged boy sitting beside him, as he was quite certain Naruto would want nothing to do with a boy whom had worked under the man who was hunting Sasuke for his own sick purposes. Dosu was it? Hiruzen asked lightly. The boy nodded in a manner Hiruzen wasn't used to seeing much in young children, though considering the boy had been working under Orochimaru, he could better understand the boy's worry. Putting aside the fact you were sent here to apparently assassinate a member of one of our village's most prestigious clans and have ties to an S-rank traitor to our village, what reason do you have to believe that I'll be willing to listen to whatever deal you apparently can offer me? Before Dosu could speak up, Naruto was on his feet with a frown on his face. Come on, Jiji. Naruto spoke loudly, Hiruzen resisting the urge to look surprised at Naruto's defensive outburst. He just said he's not working with that pasty-faced Orochi guy anymore. Plus he even saved me from Kabuto. Naruto stated, arms now crossed defiantly over his chest. Hiruzen kept his firm stare on Naruto though out of the corner of his eyes, he managed to catch the confused look in Dosu's eye that quickly vanished, the Hokage resisting the urge to smirk as it seemed Naruto was already having an effect on the Exodo ninja. Still, it wasn't like he could just accept the three ninjas so lightly, this could just be a plan set up by Orochimaru to get the three closer to Naruto and in turn Sasuke as well. The problem though was the fact such a plan would never be the kind Orochimaru would employ, Hiruzen knowing full well how the mind of his former student worked. While it could work it was just so obvious and simple Orochimaru would never use it no matter how effective. The man was a genius and because of that he would only allow himself to use genius plans that only one such as himself could come up with. I understand that Naruto and I'm very appreciative to the boy for saving you, Hiruzen said with a light smile, calming Naruto down a bit as Dosu actually blinked at the gratitude being sent his way, though he quickly covered it just as he had his confusion before. Could it be the boy wasn't used to being thanked? The thing is, as Hokage of this village, I can't listen to every attempt at bribery and offer a ninja from another village can make more so due to Dosu here being a new nin now that he's left his village. Naruto narrowed his eyes in a slit-like fashion as he frowned, thinking over the old man's words before sitting back down. Well, I still don't like it. Naruto proclaimed loudly, all you have to do is listen to what Dosu's trying to tell you and he is here right now, Naruto continued, before smirking widely, plus if you're talking with him, you have an excuse not to be doing paperwork. Hiruzen actually blinked in surprise at that last one, before laughing lightly in enjoyment, as he should have known Naruto would notice something like that. Dosu meanwhile was looking confused once more, this was the Hokage. The ninja whom had trained Orochimaru. Dosu had long expected a cold-hearted serious man who would be eager to kill off any enemy of his village without any remorse. Yet the old Hokage was nothing like he expected, though Dosu had long learned to scope out those who might be his opponents, and this old man was on Orochimaru's level, that much he was aware of. Why else would he be Hokage, more so at his age? Well, you've got me there, Naruto, Hiruzen admitted with a light smile, lacing his fingers together as he turned his attention to Dosu. Alright then, why don't you tell me what it is you have to offer me, though I'm guessing there will be terms for this information. Dosu stated simply, ridding all emotions from his face as he knew he would have to tread carefully now. The old man might just be trying to get him to let his guard down, but he would not give up this chance for himself and his team. I have information on Orochimaru and my former village's plans. If you mean his attack during the Chunin exams, I'm aware, Hiruzen replied simply, keeping back the fact what they knew was little, only that Orochimaru was planning something for the upcoming finals. That's not all, is it? What? Naruto asked in shock, jumping up from his chair as he was ready to ask about it when Hiruzen sent him a firm look, Naruto knowing full, then this was one of the times he would have to be silent. Naruto gritted his teeth before sitting down as he turned to Dosu. Dosu narrowed his eye lightly at the old man, unable to get a feel for the blank-faced Hokage at all, and he had been able to at least figure out how Orochimaru was feeling from time to time. I can also give you information on his top-ranking shinobi, their skills, and how many of them there are, Dosu offered next, knowing full well that Orochimaru would have the Sound 4 with them, though he was unsure if it would be the Sound 5 this time around, as Kamimura might have recovered enough from whatever ailment had struck him. Wow, really? Naruto asked in surprise, realizing he didn't really know the strongest ninja in his own village, though he knew the old man was at the top, as he was Hokage then Kakashi-sensei most likely. Naruto frowned as he recalled his sensei, before forcing the thoughts away as he forced himself to pay attention. Hiruzen thought over the boy's offer knowing Dosu was still holding something back, something the boy knew he would need to keep hidden to make sure Hiruzen agreed to his terms. That would be something I would be interested in, Hiruzen admitted, deciding to make the boy relax a bit from his response. What else do you have? Dosu resisted the urge to sigh, glad he had a foothold in the negotiations now before he replied. I have information on the tactics Orochimaru plans on using for the upcoming attack, also meaning his plans on dealing with yourself. Hokage-sama Dosu continued, figuring he could vaguely offer the remaining bits of information he had, one of which not even Orochimaru was aware he knew of. I'll do the slip-up of one of his other pawns. Hiruzen lightly smirked at the boy's use of Sama for him, figuring Dosu was trying to butter him up a bit more. I see now, what exactly do you want in return for all this information, when I could easily just call my Anbu in here now and have you interrogated for all you're trying to bribe me with? Hiruzen asked coldly, before chuckling a little darkly for added effect. The head of the department also happens to be a Yamanaka. Getting anything you really try to hide should be a simple matter for him. GG. Naruto spoke loudly, unable to keep himself from being quiet any further, not at all happy at seeing the old man speaking in such a way. How can you go and threaten him like that when he's willing to? Naruto. Hiruzen spoke loudly, slamming his fist onto his desk and effectively silencing Naruto, who looked shocked to see his Jiji speaking to him in such a way. As Hokage, I am required to do whatever it takes to protect my people and this entire village. Even if I must kill hundreds of thousands and be branded as the devil himself, I will do it for the sake of my people, because that is what being the Hokage means. Naruto recovered after a moment, looking a bit shaken as the Hokage's words hit him, reminding him of the sacrifice the previous Hokage had made for the village and of what he had been willing to do with Naruto himself in order to save it. Naruto nodded after a moment before sitting back down, as it was obvious he still didn't like this. Hiruzen kept his mask of indifference on, staring at Naruto a moment longer as he hoped he hadn't rattled Naruto too much, but if he was to be a ninja, and possibly even Hokage someday, he needed to be aware that those beyond their borders would view him as something to be feared and hated should the day ever come that they attack the village. Hiruzen then turned his gaze to Dosu, interested in how far the boy was willing to deal with him. If you were to attempt such a thing, I'm willing to bite my tongue off right now and choke to death on my own blood, taking my secrets to the grave, Dosu stated firmly, doing all he could to keep his nerves calm enough to speak. Well, you may eventually gain some of the information I have from my teammates. There are things I know that they do not. Things you will want to be aware of for the attack, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen stared hard at Dosu, testing the boy's resolve before allowing his grandfatherly smile to return to his face. There's no need for that, I think, he reasoned, doing his best not to laugh at the almost matching looks of surprise both boys were wearing, though it was harder to tell with Dosu, but thankfully years of dealing with Kakashi helped now. Tell me your terms and I'll see what we can do for you and your team. Dosu blinked once more before Naruto began lightly laughing, causing the mummy boy to turn in confusion at the blonde's reaction. That was a great prank, Jiji. Naruto laughed, quite aware that while Hiruzen had meant what he said, he wasn't going to do such a thing in this regard if he didn't have to. I didn't think you had it in you. Yes, well, Hiruzen mused, sitting back in his seat with an amused look on his wrinkled face. After years of watching you enjoy yourself, I figured I could manage trying it out just this once, he reasoned, before looking once more to Dosu, who was still out of his element here. Come on boy, your terms. Alright, the now unsure Genin replied, wondering if old Konoha ninja were so weird. First, I wish to gain asylum for me and my team, no prison time or anything of that sort. Hiruzen mused to himself for a moment. I can give you that, but over the next 3 months I'll be assigning someone to watch over you three to make sure you can be trusted, Hiruzen said, the terms non-negotiable. I accept, Dosu said after a moment, reasoning being watched for a few months was better than being locked up for who knows how long. Next, I wish to have me and my team placed as members of your shinobi forces. Naruto yelped in surprise, turning to look at Dosu before grinning. Ah, that'd be so cool. Naruto began to gush, Dosu once more looking at the blonde in confusion. It's like in one of those cool stories where the good guy beats up the bad guy and then the bad guy becomes a good guy too. What are you on? Dosu had to ask, trying to figure out why the boy besides him seemed so he couldn't think of a word to explain it, but he seemed to actually want to help Dosu and his team out, even after what they had done in the exam, had him saving him from Kabuto's kunai been that big of a deal? Yes, well, that too could be arranged, though you won't be able to leave the village for a set time until we can be certain this isn't a ruse, Hiruzen reasoned, having been unsure about it, but the way Naruto was interacting with Dosu was forming quite a plan in his head. Also, until the exams are finished, I'll require you and your team to keep their Odo headbands on for appearances, of course. HMPH, I'm not even planning on participating in the finals, Dosu admitted with a roll of his eye, planning on training for the month and saving his strength to deal with any Odo ninja, and more importantly Orochimaru. Nani, Naruto yelped in surprise, looking at Dosu in surprise. What the hell do you mean you're not going to participate? Don't you want to be a chunin and show off in front of all those people? Dosu once more blinked, though this time he was better ready to handle the blonde ninja. I doubt I'll be allowed to be a chunin in a village I'm just joining. In addition, I only took part in this exam for my mission, in which I've already abandoned, Dosu finished, wondering why the blonde cared. So? Don't you wanna fight all the other guys who made it to the finals? Naruto continued on, trying to figure out why Dosu couldn't possibly want to keep going. You're just going to give up after coming this far. After all you and your team went through? Naruto asked. Dosu tensed at that, recalling all the shit Zaku, Kin, and himself had gone through in the exam having been a strange series of events that somehow led to them leaving Oto to become Konoha ninja of all things. Dosu's eye narrowed as he recalled the fight in the Forest of Death, him and his team domination, all the Konoha genin going at them, only to lose to Sasuke Uchiha. The Uchiha something about Sasuke drew Orochimaru's eyes, something that had made the snake more than happy to sacrifice him and his team just to test Sasuke's strength out. The sudden idea of facing Sasuke and defeating him before not only the entire village's eyes, but Orochimaru's. To do such a thing would be glorious. Perhaps I might, Dosu spoke in a dull tone, still uncertain however, but at least willing to think the idea over a bit further now. You raise a valid point, one I will consider further. Naruto stared with his almost fully shut eyes, confused by the bandage boy's response, before just grinning widely. Sure, whatever, Naruto said with a slight laugh in his voice, before turning to the Hokage. Oh yeah, since I'm here Jiji, I was wondering if you knew anyone as good or better than Kakashi-sensei to train me for the upcoming month. The Hokage blinked in confusion at that, Kakashi having informed him he had plans already set up to have Naruto ready for the exams next month. Why? Didn't Kakashi have something set up for you? He asked, wondering if Naruto didn't know yet. HMPH, he took off to train Sasuke for the month instead. Naruto said with quite a bit of anger in his tone, Dosu's eye narrowing lightly at the mention of Sasuke getting personal training from Sharingan no Kakashi. He left me with some guy who was supposed to teach me more chakra control. Naruto ranted off. Hiruzen frowned at the news, not liking the idea of Kakashi only setting Naruto up for being taught more control, and apparently nothing more, and he said there was no chance for me to beat Neji as I am. Naruto spoke next, looking both angry and hurt in his teacher's lack of faith, the blonde clenching his right fist as he glared at the desk of the Hokage. He said that even if he gave me his full attention for the whole month I couldn't win, and that it'd be best if I just focused on advancing my skills for the next exam. I see, Hiruzen sighed, taking a moment to think over Kakashi's reasonings, having long learned Naruto wouldn't lie about this sort of thing. He knew full well why the Jonin went to teach Sasuke, it being to protect him from Orochimaru, as well as prepare him to deal with the sadistic Gaara. Because of this he had understood Kakashi's reasons for setting someone else to train Naruto for the month, but to just focus on control. Hiruzen could only deduce Kakashi didn't feel Naruto ready to learn any higher level jutsu without his being there to watch over it and chose the jutsu in question, or Kakashi had some other plans he himself couldn't fathom at the moment. In the end, Hiruzen was not happy about Kakashi's words to Naruto. A Jonin sensei must always be supportive of their student in such times, and all Kakashi had done was make Naruto unsure of himself. Naruto, don't worry about it, I know someone who's stronger than Kakashi, and who I know will be more than happy to help you train for the month, Hiruzen noted with a supportive smile towards Naruto. Just make sure to win against Neji and prove Kakashi wrong. Yes. Naruto cheered, jumping with excitement at someone stronger than his sensei teaching him, the blonde doing all he could not to jump at the old man from across his desk. I owe you big time Jiji. There's no need actually, if that's a real offer I'd like you to do something for me, Hiruzen began, acting as if an idea had just come to mind. Well, he had already planned to ask this of Naruto, his grandfatherly-like smile aimed as the curious Naruto, whom had stopped bouncing in place. It seems I have 3 newly gained genin who'll need a place to stay and supervision. Would you be willing to accommodate them for the time being? Naruto blinked in confusion, the quiet Dosu who had been the strange scene, instantly understanding what was being asked, before Naruto seemed to get it. Oh. He said, before smiling widely as he gave the old man a thumbs up. No problem Jiji, it's not like I don't have the space. Very good, then I leave them in your hands. The Hokage laughed lightly, pulling a blank note over to scribble on lightly. Here, this is where you'll be meeting your sensei for the month tomorrow at 8. For today just rest up, as you've both had quite a hard exam, Hiruzen mused, aiming his smile at both boys now. Dosu, tomorrow I would appreciate you coming back here so we can discuss all the information you'll be providing. Alright Jiji. Thank you, Hokage-sama. But that both boys rose up, Naruto giving the old Hokage a smile as Dosu just lightly bowed in politely before they left the room. Hiruzen let out a light sigh as they left, reaching into a drawer to pull out his pipe, as he really needed to smoke. Of course he had only just gotten the first puff before the door opened, revealing the next man he needed to speak to. Ibisu, I would like to know how it is exactly you came upon Naruto and the Oto boy, Hiruzen said to the sunglasses wearing special Jonin standing before him. Of course Hokage-sama, Ibisu replied, as always the professional when dealing with a village leader. I was actually following Uzumaki-san on Haddock-sensei's request. He had requested someone to teach Uzumaki-san more chakra control, and some of the basics he apparently never bothered to learn back in the academy. I see, Hiruzen mused, taking another puff from his pipe as he was the Hokage, and he'd smoke if and when he wanted to. Then might I ask why you accepted Kakashi's request? It was quite obvious how you viewed Naruto in the past, Hiruzen pointed out bluntly. Well aware of Ibisu's dirty looks to the blonde ninja the last time he had seen them both before him. The incident, however, led to Naruto meeting Konohamaru, so he was glad it had happened in the end. Ibisu frowned lightly at the Hokage's words, as he should have known he couldn't have hidden his feelings on the matter of Naruto well enough to hide them from him of all people. While I admit I did not view Uzumaki in a right manner after seeing the effect he has had on Konohamaru-kun, where I had been unable to get through, along with the skills he has gained through hard work to even end up in the finals of the Chunin exam as a rookie, Ibisu began to explain, a smile coming to his lips. I realized I had been wrong about Uzumaki-san, and I felt the need to repay him in some way by training him in whatever I could. I see, Hiruzen mused once more, unable to keep the smile from his lips, glad to finally see one of those who saw Naruto only as the fox had finally opened their eyes. He only hoped more would come. Then you would be willing to teach Naruto more than just chakra control, then? Well, of course, I merely planned on teaching him the water walking exercise and better explain how chakra control worked as Haddock-sensei's instructions, Ibisu replied, a bit surprised at what the Hokage was asking of him. With your permission, Hokage-sama, I'd like to teach Uzumaki-san more though, as unlike Haddock-sensei, I believe Uzumaki-san has a much higher chance of winning. Well, he did defeat both a Chunin and a special Jonin within a few days of graduating the academy, Hiruzen noted with an amused smile, Ibisu blushing in embarrassment as he recalled his own loss to the blonde. I want you to do, as Kakashi asked you to, but I also want you to get Naruto on the path of learning his element as well, the Hokage instructed, earning a surprised look from Ibisu. Not on manipulation of course, just find out his affinity and get him to learn enough jutsu to give him some more firepower, Hiruzen quickly added, quite aware of Kakashi's plans for doing the same with Sasuke. I see, I'd be more than happy to do so, then Hokage-sama, Ibisu said with a light smile, eager to be able to full-on teach now, though he quickly gained a frown. However, that doesn't seem enough for Uzumaki-san to stand a chance against a Hyuga boy. That is true, that's why you won't be the only one training Naruto, Hiruzen replied with a light chuckle as he rose from his desk, Ibisu once more blinking in surprise behind his sunglasses. I have someone else in mind to assist you in this, someone fitting to give the boy the skills he'll need to not only beat Neji, but possibly the whole exam, Hiruzen commented, though he doubted Naruto would be able to do so with whatever plans Orochimaru had for the finals. I see, Ibisu replied, wondering who he would be working with on this assignment, but Hokage-sama, don't you have paperwork to finish? He asked, motioning towards the nearby pile of paper. Hiruzen paused before opening the door, before turning to Ibisu with a look of absolute seriousness. Ibisu, what I am about to show you is a SSS class secret of the village, the top secret any Hokage must keep above all others. Do you understand the importance of this? He asked coldly, Ibisu only being able to nod rapidly, wondering why he was being entrusted with such a secret. Good, Hiruzen said before looking to the right warily, then the left before forming a single seal. An exact clone appeared by his side before walking over to the desk, sitting down, and starting to work on the paperwork. There, let's go, Hiruzen sighed in relief as he left the room, a very confused Ibisu following after. The Hokage clone finished the first bit of paper before smirking to himself as he reached into the drawer under where its maker's pipe was kept, pulling out a familiar book to enjoy instead of working. Well, that wasn't boring as hell, Zaku pointed out loudly as he and his teammates followed the orange menace known as Naruto. Uzumaki, tell me again, Dosu, how the hell did you pull this off again? With my brain, the thing you never use, Dosu responded simply, Zaku glaring as he went to give Dosu the finger, only to realize his bandaged arms made that impossible. Fuck you. After finishing the meeting with the Hokage, Naruto and Dosu had been taken to the holding area Kin and Zaku had been kept at. Kin had been apparently happy to rest and let her head injury heal, if only Zaku would have stopped complaining about the situation at any point. It had even gotten to the point one of the Anbu guards hit a pressure point on the boy's neck to knock him out for a bit, Kin surprising said guard for demanding why he hadn't done so sooner. After waking a confused as hell Zaku, Dosu had explained all he had managed to get done for the three of them, which both pleased and worried his team, unsure how different being ninja of Konohagakure would be to a Togakur. I need some aspirin, Kin sighed, rubbing her right temple, as she and her team continued to follow Naruto through the streets of the village, the young girl refusing to put her headband back on till her head felt better. Hey Blondie, how much farther is this place we're supposed to be staying at? Not far, though it's on the cheap side of town, Naruto explained, lightly glad she wasn't using the nickname Zaku had come up for him instead of his actual name. It's a large apartment building, and well, I sorta own it. You own a whole apartment building? Zaku asked in surprise, the look on his face mirrored by Kin while Du just rose a brow in curiosity. Don't you mean your parents own it? Don't have any, I'm an orphan, Naruto replied with a shrug, not noticing the re-evaluating looks he was getting from all three ex-Odos at this news, and I own it because I was kicked out of the orphanage and needed a place to stay. Hokage bought me the place from the guy who used to own it, after asking if I could just have a room and the guy refused, Naruto explained. Naruto having recalled the look the old landlord had given him, refusing to let something like him live in his apartment building. The old man had not been happy and after asking Naruto to leave the room for a bit, later informed the young blonde that he now owned the entire apartment building. The Hokage of course handled the finances, making only the room Naruto lived in was the one with running water and power, so as to not be too costly. The three behind him were silent for a bit before Dosu finally spoke up, "May I ask a reason you would be kicked out of the orphanage?" He asked curiously, ignoring the curious looks of his teammates at him, even bothering to ask such a thing. Well, Naruto began, pausing in the middle of the street as he turned around with a sheepish grin, unsure of how to best explain it. Let's just say people have the need to blame someone or something on all their problems, for no real reason, it just so happens the someone in mind is me, Naruto explained, a bit confused on how to best describe the villagers' problems with him, you understand. I Dosu replied simply, a spark of something his revealed eye making Naruto actually believe him. Well, can we get back to moving now? Kin spoke up with a frown on her lips aimed towards Naruto, while at the same time wondering why Dosu seemed to actually be politely conversing with the blonde they were stuck with at the moment. Ah, right. Naruto shouted, quickly turning around as he began to once more lead the way towards his apartment building. Naruto couldn't help but wonder what it'd be like to actually have other tenants living at the building, even if they were the three whom had caused so many problems for them back in the Forest of Death. And again, the mummy guy seemed alright, he actually reminded Naruto a little of Shino, though he hadn't really conversed much with the Abiram. The girl he wasn't sure of yet, her headache making her snappy with all three of them, though that could actually just be how she was as from what he had heard from Sakura and what he had seen of her fight with Shikamaru she was a bit mean. The spiky-haired guy however was another story, loud and rude, he reminded Naruto of Kiba in many ways, but it was because of what he had done to Sakura back in the forest that kept Naruto from wanting much to do with him. If not for the fact he was the mummy guy's teammate and the Hokage wanted them to stay at his building, Naruto wouldn't have anything to do with him. Behind him, the Odo trio were having their own little conversation, having long practiced speaking in low tones to one another, so not to be overheard, their lips not even moving as they did so, though with Dosu it was impossible to tell. He's a moron, Zaku was adding in, the topic of course being Naruto, with whom they were trying to evaluate, we knew that going into the mission. Actually all we were told was that the Uchiha's teammates were of no importance, Kin chimed in, eyes narrowed suspiciously at Naruto's back, yet the Hokage stuck us with him, could he be an undercover Anbu? No, he would have handled Kabuto better that, and his eyes hide nothing of his emotions, Dosu followed with, his own eye on the blonde's back, but it was an appraising sort compared to Kin's suspicious glare, he is skilled however, back in Odo there was a book mentioning the Kage bunch in the chakra, to make one is above genin level, and yet this boy was able to make 20 against Kabuto, even after dealing with the Forest of Death and his fight with the Inyazuka. I missed that one, my lucky ass went second remember. Zaku reminded with a roll of his eyes, before letting his eyes slide to Dosu, how did he do in his fight then, you're the best at judging that sort of thing right? He was different, Dosu admitted, eye narrowing as he let his mind run over Naruto's fight with Kiba really quick, he had a surprising amount of chakra after dealing with the forest, and the Inyazuka had even had a few days at the tower to rest, meaning he was in much better shape, Dosu began to explain, pausing as he suddenly noticed all the villagers looking in distaste at Naruto. That is Dosu mentally added this information to his mental picture of the blonde in question, it being just another piece of the strange puzzle he has been stuck with, while his means of putting the Inyazuka off balance were unorthodox, if this is how far he is with only basic training, I'm certain he shall be a monster on the battlefield with some proper training. What do you mean by that? Kin asked with her gaze turning to Dosu, trusting Dosu's judgment on this, even if the blonde didn't seem like nothing more than a blonde Zaku, the basic training bit I mean. It's obvious after seeing him fight, Dosu spoke, unknown to them smirking under his bandages, he has no formal taijutsu training, he has so much chakra that he can barely control it, he spams his bunshin excessively, and from what I've heard from his mouth and seen of his female teammate, his sensei focuses on the Uchiha. Makes you wonder what it'd be like if he actually had some training, doesn't it? Zaku mused before looking to Dosu with a knowing look, you are a magnificent bastard. Thank you, Dosu replied, actually sporting a smirk at the compliment from his usually insulting teammate. Well, his actions seemed to have him getting close to a young ninja who could possibly one day match the Sanin. There was more the puzzle of Naruto Uzumaki than Dosu knew, and it irked him to no end. More than that, why the hell did the boy give him a sense of companionship he'd only ever remotely come close to with his own teammates? That's right, help her get all the soap massaged in there. No, that's right, slowly and steady. Hiruzen sighed loudly, instantly making the crouched kabuki-looking man jump in surprise. The younger than Hokage, but older than Ibisu, who was quite red at what he had heard, man stood up before turning only to sigh in relief. Damn sir-sensei. The white-haired pervert of a man, whom in fact, had been peeking through a hole in the female side of the onsen he was standing beside, laughed in relief. I thought for sure I was screwed there. It's good to see you too, Jiraiya. Hiruzen offered with a pleased smile, as always glad to see the one student whom hadn't left the village. I figured you'd arrived earlier in order to rest up for our meeting, Hiruzen offered, resisting the urge to go further as Ibisu was right beside him. Ibisu was keeping his mouth shut, as Jiraiya was a legendary ninja he himself had once looked up to while advancing through the ranks. It wasn't till he reached a certain age he came to find out that his childhood hero was a self-proclaimed super pervert and was famous more for his Icha Icha series of novels than for his skills as one of the three Sanin of Konoha. Yeah, well, it has been a while since I've been able to be inspired by the beauties of the leaf. Jiraiya shot back with a smirk, crossing his arms over his chest as he leaned against the onsen wall. Now, I'm guessing something's come up if you want to see me early like this, or are you just trying to escape your paperwork again? Hiruzen chuckled sheepishly, as all cages before him, making himself seem just as Jiraiya described. The truth was the first Hokage had long grown to abhor paperwork, having gotten to the point he was going to make the ninja council larger, then it was just to push some of the paperwork over to them. If not for his younger brother, the second Hokage, suggesting the use of Kage Bunshin, this in fact would have happened. After many headbutts to his desk for not thinking up such an idea himself, the first and second swore to keep the secret in order to use the paperwork excuse to be left alone in their offices to sew whatever the hell they wanted to. Hiruzen had been given this excuse and had used it whenever he could to enjoy the quiet of his office and watch various events across the village through his special cage orb. He of course passed on this knowledge to the fourth, who had been less subtle as he never complained about paperwork, but Hiruzen figured so long as no one found out it was alright. Yes, well, Hiruzen laughed sheepishly, shooting a look to Ibisu to not mention what he had seemed, the sunglasses wearing Jonin being one of the few in history to know of the cage's secret to defeating the paperwork. Besides that, this has more to do with your former teammates' upcoming plans. Jiraiya lost his smirk, gaining a serious look as he thought of Orochimaru. I was planning on talking to you about it tomorrow. I have some more news on him you'll need to know, Jiraiya said stiffly. Yes, we were lucky to also find another source of information, Hiruzen replied with a frown of his own. The three Oto Genin apparently cut ties with Orochimaru after learning he was planning on killing them for their failure. I've allowed them to join the village in exchange for the information they have on the upcoming attack. Convenient, Jiraiya noted with a suspicious smirk. I doubt Orochimaru would have given them much information if they were just low-level pawns of his. More than likely I know everything they have to tell you already. That is true, and there's always the chance this is a ploy by Orochimaru to sneak some spies into the village, Hiruzen added, only to smile as Jiraiya snorted at his suggestion. Yes, I realized it's too simple for him to do as well. More so if he had another of his spies reveal themselves to do it, a member of the traitor Kabuto Yakushi's team at that, Hiruzen explained. Before frowning once more, sadly Yoroi vanished before we could capture him, his fellow teammate also gone missing from his hospital room. More than likely Orochimaru grabbed them up, Jiraiya added in, before regaining a smirk. So, why did you allow the three brats into our forces? It'd be easier to just have Inoichi grab whatever they know from their heads before tossing them into a cell for a few years. There's no need to be so cruel. I'm sure they received enough of that from Orochimaru, Hiruzen noted with a frown, wondering just what sort of lives the three ex-Oto ninja had under his former student. It would explain some of the personality quirks he'd seen from all three. It was more to do with the fact Naruto spoke up for them. Jiraiya resisted the urge to flinch, not meeting his sensei's eyes at the mention of his godson. Well, he had never spoken to the boy, he'd only seen him a few times without the boy actually seeing him. He could come up with 1,000 excuses why he hadn't taken Naruto in or anything of that sort. The truth simply was he was working for the good of Konoha, being outside keeping his spy network going non-stop for any information that could keep his village and his godson within it safe. He couldn't take the boy with him as the dangers Jiraiya faced were far too great to put a child through that, and moving place to place wasn't good for a kid who needed consistency in the early years of his life. But, it wasn't like he'd left Naruto out to dry, as he himself had given the money needed for Naruto to own and run the apartment building he now lived in. As the boy couldn't access his parents' accounts until he was of Chunin rank per his father's request, Jiraiya had paid for the boy's academy supplies and such through Hiruzen. Every year he'd have Hiruzen pass along a birthday present as well, the goggles the young boy wore being something Jiraiya had picked up back in Kurigakure. Of course, after getting Naruto a pranking kid one year, Hiruzen had made sure Jiraiya was more thoughtful with his gifts. He wasn't the best godfather, but he was doing the best he could, though he was looking forward to finally meeting Naruto in person. How did the Gaki get involved with those three? Jiraiya asked, covering his tracks at the mentioning of Naruto as he put a smile back onto his face. They don't seem the friendly type, and I can't see him wanting to go near anyone that has to do with the guy who hurt his teammates, Jiraiya noted, having heard of the attack on Sasuke during the second exam. It would seem one of them saved Naruto from having a kunai in his skull, Hiruzen replied, finding an unhappy look coming to Jiraiya's face, as Ibisu just looked surprised, the Jonin having not seen that part. Kabuto Yakushi was attempting to either kill or capture the Odogen and Naruto jumped in to fight him off, only to have the boy Dosu jump in and save him from a surprise attack. Jiraiya frowned a bit deeper. The punk could have just made a run for it, left the Gaki behind and made his escape, Jiraiya reasoned off. Exactly, it would seem Naruto has had an effect on the three, or at least Dosu, Hiruzen noted with a pleased smile. That's why I've had Naruto let the three use one of the rooms in his building. I plan on having those three sticking close to Naruto. With enough time I'm sure Naruto could get them to reveal anything they plan on hiding from us. HMPH, Gaki takes after his mother in that way then, Jiraiya mused with a smirk, before raising a brow towards Ibisu, having just noticed him. Who's this? Ah, I am Ibisu, Jiraiya-sama. Ibisu greeted with a bright smile, nervously bowing in greeting to the famous man. I shall be teaching Uzumaki-san over the upcoming months for the Chunin exam finals. Ah, so he made it that far, did he? Jiraiya asked with a pleased smirk, only to lose it as he looked confused. Wait, isn't Kakashi his sensei? Hiruzen resisted the urge to sigh, knowing how this would go down though it played into his plans. It would seem Kakashi is focusing his attentions on his other student for the finals, seeing as how he's facing a more dangerous opponent. You mean the Uchiha, right? Jiraiya asked with an unhappy look on his face, having had his own experiences where a sensei favors another student over the others, though Sarutobi had never gone as far as abandoning them to focus on Orochimaru figures he would. White Hiruzen sighed in relief, glad Jiraiya hadn't gone off on a rant, the Hokage recalling his own actions during his students' genin years, which he had later fixed after realizing what his favoritism was doing to the team dynamics. It still made him wonder though, if had he treated them equally at the start, would he have all three still with him? Jiraiya mused, looking at Ibisu in an appraising way, making the special Jonin tense up nervously. What are you planning on teaching him? Haddock-senpai wished me to focus on Naruto's basics and chakra control, Ibisu replied, resisting the urge to flinch as the fierce gleam in the Sanin's eyes at hearing such news. However, Hokage-sama and myself have agreed to get Uzumaki-san started on learning some jutsu of his elemental type for the finals. That's better, Jiraiya chuckled, a lot more relaxed after hearing that, though the Gaki's going to need more than that. Who's he fighting against first? Niji Hyuga, Hiruzen added in with a smile, Jiraiya shaking his head with a sigh at the news. Niji is a true genius of his house. I fear Naruto will need an edge to go against Niji's Byakugan. You got that right, Jiraiya agreed with a nod, turning his head to lock eyes with Hiruzen before nodding as he looked to Ibisu. Alright, seems you'll be working with me to train the brat. I think it best if take him in the mornings, let him rest for a bit before you can take over in the afternoon. Sound good? Aye, yes. Ibisu said, both stunned and excited that he would apparently working alongside Jiraiya of the Sanin. That sounds just fine, though I think it prudent that we both work with him on the first day, to at least let him know what he'll be learning, and to also focus on his control issue first. That sounds good, we'll meet here at noon tomorrow then, Jiraiya said with a nod before turning his back and crouching to resume his work, making Ibisu lose his excited look to just frown in embarrassment while Hiruzen just chuckled. Oh, and sensei. Yes, Jiraiya? Hiruzen asked curiously, about ready to head back to his office. Have the Gaki bring his new friends, I want to meet them. It had turned into quite a problem when the group had made it to the apartment building, having only after unlocking one of the unused rooms that they had no power, water, or even beds inside of them. After a curse fest from Zaku at this, Naruto had offered to let them stay in his room for the night, planning on speaking with the Hokage in the morning about setting his new tenants up with power and water. When it came to actually getting furniture, the three didn't have a problem, and it was only after Naruto let them into his room that he asked why. Why you're rich? Naruto shouted in shock, looking at the pile of cash Dosu had unsealed from a scroll he had hidden on his person. How did you get all that? And Odo, if one can't keep track of what is theirs, then they have no real rights to it, Dosu replied simply, holding up a wad of ryo to finger through as Naruto looked at him in confusion. Means he stole it, Zaku replied with a smirk, having taken a seat on Naruto's couch, sitting on Dosu's left. I'm just glad we made him swear not to ever steal from us. HMPH, you barely have any money worth stealing anyways, Dosu supplied, pausing his counting of cash to look to Naruto, who was practically drooling at the sight of so much cash. How much will our room be, with power and water? Huh? Naruto asked in surprise, not expecting the question before holding a hand up to wave the question off. Don't worry about it, that Gigi asked me to take care of you guys, so I will. Dumbass, he's offering you money. Zaku yelled at Naruto with a light glare, why would you turn that down? Because I haven't done anything to earn it. Naruto stated firmly, glaring back at Zaku only to flinch as he felt a wad of cash hit his chest. Huh? This is way too much. Naruto said, shocked at being given a roll of Ryo as large as he was holding. That's first month's rent, Dosu stated firmly, starting to reseal the rest of his money up. It's also for saving myself and my teammates before, as well as assisting me in gaining the Hokage's favor to allow us to stay within the village's walls, Dosu pointed out, before letting his eye slide up to the surprised-looking Naruto. If you do not think that is worth something to me, then you are truly a fool. Didn't have to go that far, Naruto pointed out with a frown, looking to the cash in hand before pocketing it with a smile. Fine, I'll take it, but dinner's on me. Great, Zaku spoke up, looking confused as he looked at Dosu, the mummy boy sealing his stuff back up. Whatever it is, we better get to it quick, Kin spoke as she returned to the room, a frown on her face as since she arrived she'd been cleaning up the messy apartment, having no plans on sleeping in a place dirtier than the forest of death. I'm starving. I know just the place. Naruto stated with a bright smile, more than happy to share the greatest ramen shop that ever existed with new people. Great, food's gonna be shit, Zaku sighed dramatically. Or please. Zaku called out with a wide smirk, licking his lips after finishing his bowl of ramen. No way in hell. Kin growled at him, before looking to the blinking form of Am, whom was currently about to pour the boy another bowl. I'm not feeding this idiot anymore. It's not like I can do it myself, damn it. Zaku growled at her, looking down at his arms, and the cute ramen girl's too busy to do it for me. Aw, you're making me blush, Am gushed, earning a smile, not a smirk, from Zaku, only to lose it as Tsuchi Ichiraku glared from the back of the shop while cutting noodles. HMPH, no one can resist the power of ramen, Naruto pointed out with a fox-like grin, before moving on to his third bowl. To say the least, the former Odo trio's introduction to Ichiraku ramen was a strange experience. Zaku had of course been more than willing to bitch about his lack of arm use, only to sit down happily as Am came for their order. After a game of rock, paper, scissors between the remaining three ninja, Kin had lost and was forced to feed Zaku. I have to say it's better than I expected, Dosu pointed out as he fixed his bandages back over his mouth. The ramen back home was never so satisfying, he noted, before looking to both Tsuchi and Am. My compliments. Both ramen cooks seemed surprised at the boy's manners, before both smiled at his praise. It's nothing, anything for friends of Naruto. Tsuchi chuckled in response, missing the unsure looks that came to all four genins' faces at being referred to as friends. Just do us a favor though, Am spoke up as she poured another bowl, setting it down before Dosu. Even though you're from another village, would you mind making sure Naruto-chan doesn't strain himself too much during the upcoming month? Don't call me Chan. Naruto spoke loudly, Am just giggling as he returned to his bowl, and I do just fine. Dosu looked a bowl set before him curiously, letting his eye slip over to Naruto, before returning back to Am, who flashed him another smile. I shall do so, Dosu spoke simply, his hand moving to his bandages to uncover his mouth, all while getting shocked looks from his teammates and Naruto. There's no need for that, Dosu, Naruto said with a sheepish smile, figuring Dosu was doing so for the free bowl. You have your own training after all. That is true, Dosu spoke up, pausing to sip up some of the ramen he had just fed himself. However, that doesn't mean I cannot watch out for you as well, and I can always train close for when you mess up and hurt yourself. Hey, who said I'd mess up? Naruto demanded, before growling as Dosu just seemed to ignore him. Whatever, just make sure your training doesn't suffer for it. When I kick your ass in the finals, I want a challenge out of it. I as well, Dosu added after, unable to keep his smile hidden this time due to his bandage adjustments. Through this, both Kin and Zaku had watched silently, quite confused at seeing Dosu like this. He'd always been quiet and only spoke to them in a polite manner or to insult them, though they insulted one another all the time, so it wasn't a big deal. What was strange was seeing Dosu acting like this with someone outside of their group, and if anything he seemed more relaxed around the kid than he did with them. Both were planning of speaking of this to Dosu when they had a chance to get him alone, unsure if he was planning something with the blonde that might risk their new lives within Konoha. Hey, is that you, Naruto? The group at the stand turned towards the familiar voice, Naruto instantly smiling at the sight of his teammate. Hey Sakura-chan, why do he began, only to pause at seeing the look of fear on her face, only to realize just who he was sitting with. Hey Pinky. Zaku greeted with a vicious smirk, tilting his head at the seat next to him. Wanna join us? Dosu should have known the man's offer would come with a price, the pale-skinned Orochimaru, having set him with many other children his age, in what was basically an underground prison. They were roomed up with others that had been given advancements, whether it be new untested weapons, surgical enhancements, or anything else Orochimaru wished to test out. Sadly though, many of those enhanced died shortly after, and even a rare few never took to them, leaving them as normal as they were before. These few rarely lived, having no new abilities or weapons to fight with, other than their own two hands. It was one of these such people that Dosu found himself sharing a cage with, the boy himself having yet to speak to his roommate, though they too seemed to ignore him. Dosu however was fascinated by the tool he'd been given, a device known as the melody arm, which would allow him to control various vibrations and sounds with just a slight use of his chakra. Sadly he had only been given little instruction on using his chakra before being tossed in here, the village of Tagakur being a sink-or-swim type of place. "What's your name?" Dosu blinked, turning his head to look to the dirty-looking girl, her hair shortened in a way that made her seem more boyish. Dosu had a feeling this was to give the illusion that she was in fact a boy, though her lack of an Adam's apple instantly gave her away. She was in a simple brown shirt, torn black pants, and nothing more. He could tell from her feet she had been without any sort of footwear for a while now, though her hands were in a similar state. The girl frowned at him, clearly annoyed that he wasn't responding to her question. "It's an easy question, unless you don't have one," she continued, fully expecting him to respond now. Dosu replied simply, fully turning towards her to give her a full look at himself, glad he had been able to swipe a roll of bandages before being tossed into his cage. "I'm Kin," the girl replied, her eyes looking him over briefly, assessing him before she paused her gaze on his face. "Is that where they worked on you?" she asked curiously. "No, this is from before I came to Odo," Dosu replied simply, before raising the arm bearing his melody arm. "I was merely given this. What of you?" "They injected me with something. It was supposed to give me a bloodline belonging to one of Orochimaru-sama's servants," Kin replied with a frown as she recalled the treatment. "It didn't take and I have nothing." "I see," Dosu mused, the fact being this girl was as good as dead the moment they were let out to fight the others who had taken to their enhancements would slaughter her. "You seem to be taking things well considering." "Yeah well, I always figured I was going to die in some ditch," Kin offered with self-loathing amusement in her tone. "My mother died a year ago. My father was just another of her costumers, and there's no way I'd try to be like my mother," Kin continued, the girl glad she had been able to keep her hair short so as to not draw unwanted attention. "I accepted the offer to come here, hoping I could live better and actually mean something to someone before I died," Kin admitted, Dosu's keen eyes picking up the girl was doing her best not to cry. And yet I won't be able to do even that," she muttered, before looking right into his eye as she hugged herself. "Dosu, when I die, would you at least remember me, if only from time to time, so someone knows I was here?" Dosu stared blankly, trying to keep himself from paying any mind to a girl who might just be trying to put him off guard and kill him all to steal his melody arm. Yet the way she was looking at him, it was far different than any other he dealt with. Many a person had acted nice to him, all wanting something from him, all with eyes revealing their true goals to him. All he could see in Kin's eyes was a need to know that someone cared that she had been alive. It didn't help her eyes were way too similar to his own mother's before she had been taken from him. With a sigh, Dosu lifted his shirt, which instantly made Kin flinch, before the girl noticed Dosu had bandaged random items to his own body. Dosu had easily been able to swipe various tools on the way to being locked up, using the bandages he had stolen to strap them to himself, so as to not be noticed. After a bit of searching, Dosu tossed down a kunai and a case filled with senbon he had swiped while passing a group of Odo ninjas on their break. "Use the kunai when someone gets close, the senbon for hitting targets from a ranged position, though you might want to practice a little with them beforehand," Dosu instructed, looking to the shocked look on Kin's face. "When we're let out you stick with me, working together will give us a better chance of making it out of this thing alive," he reasoned. "Now quit crying and make some use of yourself or you really will die." Kin blinked before wiping her eyes clean of tears. Shut up." She growled at him, finishing her wiping before grabbing both kunai and senbon, before leveling a glare at him, only to lose it as she returned her gaze to the weapons given to her. "Thank you." "You're welcome." Both children jumped at the sound of their cell being open again, an Odo ninja tossing in another kid their age, this one wearing rags similar to Dosu's own, only with dirty spiky black hair. "Aw, fuck me." The kid growled, pushing himself up with a wince. Once in a sitting position he looked over his new roomie's grate, a one-eyed mummy and a girl-looking crybaby. "I am so screwed." Dosu lightly glared in annoyance while Kin glared heatedly as she jumped to her feet. "I am a girl, dumbass," she growled, instantly drawing a senbon before launching it. "Ow. That hurt, damn it." Well, at least she had good aim, Dosu mused as Kin began using Zaku for target practice. Naruto Uzumaki had been having a strange day, and that was saying something when it came to the life of any ninja. He had defeated Kiba in Izuka thanks to his amazing skills, been denied training from his sensei due to favoritism, had 3 enemy ninja drop down on him, learned his friend Kabuto was a traitor, fought Kabuto alongside a mummy-looking guy whose team tried to kill his own team, helped said guy and his team become Konoha ninja, had gained 3 new tenants to his apartment building, and had just been enjoying a trip to Ichiraku ramen with actual company for once, Tucci and AM not counting as they were always there due to the fact they owned and worked at the shop. However, out of all the crap he had been through in this day, none of it had any standing to Sakura, his teammate and longtime crush, finding him eating with the enemy with a smile on his face. Oh yes, there would be blood spilled before the night was through, and Naruto was sure it would be his own. I can explain. Naruto offered up, keeping himself from turning his gaze from the shocked Pinkette in fear she would take that time to strike. How? Sakura demanded, pointing viciously at the Odo trio who were watching with different expressions on their face, Dosu's being blank, Kin's being a smirk, and Zaku was wishing he could move his arms enough to wave hello, you're eating with them, the guys who tried to kill Sasuke-kun, me, and all the others back in the forest of death. In our defense, Dosu felt the need to point out, drawing Sakura's glare as Naruto seemed eager for any help in this regard. We were only trying to kill Sasuke and the others just got in the way. Hence, it's your own damn faults, Zaku added with a smirk, before turning back around to give AM a smile. Now, about that second bull AM-chan. Good lord, Kin sighed, shaking her head at Zaku's attempt at wooing the ramen cook, before she regained her smirk. Listen Pinky, we were ninjas with a mission that was to kill your boy Toichiha. Would you ignore a mission given to you? That's not the point. Sakura shouted back, unhappy that the Kanauchi's words made some sense. Even so, you still tried to kill Sasuke-kun. She pointed out, turning her glare to Naruto as Kin just shrugged. Why are you with them? They just admitted to trying to kill Sasuke-kun, and they almost killed us. They were doing the same thing anyone in their position would do. Naruto spoke in the Odo trio's defense, all three looking to him with slight surprise. If we were given a mission to go into another village and kill someone, we'd do it too. That's different, Sakura reasoned, looking unsure now, and a little shocked Naruto was speaking back to her like this. No, it's not, Naruto continued, frowning at her as he recalled what the Hokage had said to him back at the meeting with Dosu and himself. We're ninja, they're ninja, and as ninja, we'll have to do things that while might seem like justice to use, will make us seem like monsters and demons to others. That still doesn't explain why you're with them. Sakura yelled at him, unhappy that he was making sense in this case, more so when it involved the monsters that had tried to kill Sasuke. Sakura couldn't forget the merciless way the trio had dealt with her, Team 10, and of course Rock Lee. Because they're on our side now, Naruto said with a bright smile, earning a look of disbelief on Sakura's face. Look, I'm sure they're very sorry for what they did, just let them Appo. We refuse. Naruto blinked, before slowly turning to Dosu who had returned to his meal. Dosu, come on man, just apologize, and everything will be fine, Naruto said, forcing his smile back to his lips. Me and my team have nothing to apologize for, Dosu replied simply, turning his head to meet his eye with Naruto's. We were told failure to kill Sasuke would mean our deaths. Your teammate got in our way for me, and my team's sake, I would have done anything to complete the mission, Dosu explained simply, before returning his gaze to his meal. I will not apologize for doing what was needed for the sake of the mission, would you? Aye, Naruto replied, only to find himself at a loss for words before being snapped out of it as Sakura suddenly had taken off. Sakura-chan. He called out, only to find she was already out of sight. Damn it. Well, I'll at least apologize for pissing of your girlfriend off, Zaku offered up, looking quite happy as he had convinced AM to feed him. It of course made the bowl cost twice as much, but it was worth it. She's not my girlfriend, Naruto sighed, realizing he would have to find some way to make peace with Sakura and hopefully find some way to get her to forget the past with the 3x Odo ninja. As Naruto sat back down beside Dosu, he found a bowl of ramen set before him, Naruto blinking in surprise as Teuchi smiled at him from the other side of the counter. That one's on the house, Teuchi told him, lightly ruffling Naruto's hair, making the blonde frown at being treated in a childlike fashion. Teuchi then turned his attention onto the other three, choosing to ignore the sight of his daughter feeding Zaku, who was obviously going to be trouble in the future. I'm well aware how the ninja world works, but I must ask if you're still intending on harming Sasuke Uchiha. We are no longer with Odo, Dosu supplied after a moment, hence we no longer have any need to kill the Uchiha, and we have no reason to harm anyone of this village, unless they give us a reason to. That's good enough for me then, the old man said with a nod, before smiling brightly. Now, who's up for more? The next morning Naruto groaned as the sun hid his face from the nearby window, a frown on his face as he sat up and stitched. After finishing dinner he had returned home with his new tenants, things having been a little tense after the meeting with Sakura. After cleaning off a few spots inside of his apartment, he ended up sleeping on the floor while letting Kin use his bed, which she had accepted with a curious gaze to him before heading off to bed. Zaku was given the couch as he was injured and needed it more than either Naruto or Dosu, the latter who took the chair he had been sitting at earlier to sleep upon. Naruto had been about to sleep where he stood, only to be surprised as Kin threw one of the pillows from the bed at him, and followed by a blanket. Naruto looked curiously around, surprised to find Dosu nowhere in sight, Zaku snoring on the couch nearby, and Kin sitting in the chair Dosu had slept pulling hairs from her eyebrows. Is that a white hair? Naruto asked innocently, only to brace himself as the vicious girl sent him a glare. Luckily she returned to looking into the mirror she was holding, pulling the hair in question. They pop up from time to time, Kin informed him as she finished, giving her eyebrows a once more look over before smiling contently, only to lose it as she noticed Naruto staring again. What? And nothing just didn't figure you to be the girly type, Naruto offered up nervously, knowing from experience what girls could do when angered. Well, I'm not as obsessed as the girls in this village seem to be about my looks, I care enough not to let myself look ratty, Kin replied with a light shrug, putting the mirror she was holding on the coffee table, before looking to him finally, well, we're talking about fashion, what's up with the jumpsuit? What's wrong with it? Naruto asked with a light frown, looking down upon himself while wondering why so many people seemed to dislike his choice in attire. They were cheap, they have lots of pockets to hold things, and best of all they're orange. Wait, what do you mean they? Kin asked, only to realize what he had to mean, why you have more than one of those things. Well yeah, my closet's full of them, Naruto pointed out, unsure why she seemed so horrified by the fact all his outfits were the same thing, what's the big deal? I swear, how you managed to make it through the Chunin exams, Kin sighed, rubbing her right temple, as she realized her and her team would have to be seen with him in the future, plus there was something about him that seemed to draw Dosu of all people in, and she was curious as to what it was. Alright, once Dosu gets back the first thing we're doing is getting you something more fitting for a ninja, Kin informed him bluntly, not giving him a chance to respond as she pointed at his jumpsuit. No one is going to take you seriously in that, I mean it's almost like you're trying to be noticed. Naruto bit back a retort, frowning as she had nailed it with that last bit as he had originally picked the outfit due to how much orange seemed to attract attention, though now that he thought about it, his choice in attire seemed to draw the wrong kind of attention. The Hokage, Haruka, his classmates, Kakashi, and a few others had pointed out how bad his outfit was for a ninja at least once each, but it was such a great color. Fine, but only if there's at least some orange in it, Naruto relented with a sigh, trying to look on the bright side, maybe Sakura would be more into him if he looked more professional. Though now that he thought about it, Sasuke wore white shorts, and the Uchiha clan symbol just drew attention to him as well. That's fine, Kin agreed with a sigh of relief, having already guessed she wouldn't be getting a full transformation out of this. I mean, what kind of person wore a color for so long and gave it up entirely like that? She herself doubted she'd ever change her own fashion much over the years, though maybe some changes to make her look less Odo-ish down the line wouldn't hurt. With the money Dosu gave you yesterday, we should be able to get you a few new outfits which you need, Kin noted, before smirking as he glared at her for that, not wanting to spend his money all on clothes. Don't look at me like that'll get Dosu to buy breakfast for us if it makes you feel bet. Ichiraku's. Both Naruto and Zaku shouted out, Naruto staring in surprise at the eager look on the now awake teenager's face, while Kin just groaned loudly as she face-palmed. It had become apparent Zaku had a crush on the ramen stand girl, AM apparently having been amused by the younger boy's affection, enough to use it to get him to pay more for feeding him. No more ramen. Kin roared at the both, making Naruto hold his hands up to pacify her, while Zaku just gave her an annoyed frown. The door to the apartment opening up ended the conversation, the three turning to find an Anbu agent entering, a cat-like mask on her face, her body type obviously female, hiding her identity. Uzumaki, you and your guests are to report to the Konoha hot spring and spa at noon today to meet your sensei for the month, she informed him, before shifting aside to let Dosu enter, the bandage boy having returned from wherever he had been off to. Alright, thanks Nico-chan. Naruto said excitedly, the Anbu in question seemed to stare at him for a moment before nodding, before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. I really hope I learn that. Me too kid, Zaku admitted with a frown, having wanted to learn the technique ever since he had first seen Orochimaru use it after first arriving in Itagakure years ago. The hell did you go Dosu? I was looking over the apartments, Dosu replied, eye focused on Naruto. Would it be possible to knock one of the walls down to combine two of the apartments into one? I guess so, Naruto said, wondering why he had never thought to do that as he really could use more room for various other things he didn't have at the moment, just so long as you don't knock the whole building down. Not a problem, Dosu replied, before looking to Zaku and Kin. We should be able to each have our own rooms in that case. One of the apartments has 2 bedrooms available, and once me connected to the next apartment over we'll each have our own room. Sweet. Zaku said with a smirk, as they had been forced to bunk together back in Odo, due to lack of space, which was weird, because Orochimaru's bases always had long hallways and lots of rooms. What he did with each one was not something one would ask without fearing for their lives. Then let's get something to eat, get the fucking furniture, and then enjoy the hot springs while Blondie's busy training. First things first, Kin spoke up, glancing to Naruto for a moment before looking to Dosu. We get Uzumaki here some new threads, Kin said, smirking as Dosu rose an eyebrow at her words, while Naruto realized this was the first time the girl had called him by his last name. If he's going to be in the finals, he at the very least should look good doing it. Didn't think you were into younger guys, Zaku joked with a smirk, only to yelp in pain as a senbon pierced his arm. Bitch. That's the good arm. So Zaku began the conversation, his arm re-bandaged from Kin's earlier attack. What exactly is it with you and this kid anyway? How exactly do you mean? Dosu asked from his seat beside Zaku, both staring at the somewhat amusing side of Kin, dragging a struggling Naruto towards the changing rooms, the girl quite adamant about him getting more professional attire. You act like you're just using this brat, but there's more to it, Zaku pointed out with a quick glance of annoyance towards his teammate before returning his gaze forward. If anything, you seem to enjoy being around him. Zaku didn't feel the need to add the fact that Dosu seemed more comfortable around Naruto than he ever had with him, but it wasn't like they had ever expressed any of their true emotions around each other, only on rare instances that were never spoken of again. That boy has the right to hate us for what we did in the Forest of Death to his team, as well as his fellow Konoha ninja, Dosu began to explain, smiling hidden under his bandages as he saw Naruto make a run for it via cage bunshin, only for Kin to somehow grab the real one, punch him over the head, and drag him back, yet when facing an obviously stronger opponent, he stood by me to face him on. Even though I was from another village and was obviously an enemy to him and his team as well, Dosu spoke, before turning his head to Zaku. I have never had something like that. Zaku stared back, a frown on his lips as he thought over his mummified comrade's words, and he had to admit other than Dosu and Kin, he couldn't think of anyone who would do something like that for him. No one back in Odo would have tried to save them as the blonde had, Orochimaru wouldn't have cared unless it somehow affected his own goals, and as a child, they had all three been orphans, no one cared for or loved. Each of them knew each other's stories. It was something they had done one night on a highly dangerous mission, though they had expected to die the next morning, hence why they dropped their guards around one another for that once. The thing that pissed him off the most about that mission. The fact that he had enjoyed his teammates much more when they had dropped the masks forced upon them in order to live within a Togakur. It was because of this that their team actually trusted one another, the mission ending with them promising should any of them ever die the others wouldn't shed a tear about it. The promise was something they would lightly mention from time to time, it being the only thing they actually spoke up about that night, it being their own way to show they actually gave a shit about one another. Well, it seems even Kin is starting to grow attached, Zaku mused with a smirk, enjoying the sight of the Kinauchi manhandling someone other than himself for once, and if it wasn't for him, I'd never have met that hot IAM. Dosu rolled his eye, knowing quite well that was Zaku speak for he's alright in regards to Naruto. Dosu looked to Naruto, whom had finally given in and accepted the various outfits Kin wanted him to try on, a bit surprised to find his female teammate acting so much closer to the blonde already. Yet, there was something about Naruto that just drew them, Dosu was unsure how to describe it. That was reminded him of how Orochimaru had drawn them in, yet, instead of fear in regards to Naruto, there was only a warm feeling that reminded him more of the days before he had lost his family, days he barely remembered before he was forced to steal and kill to survive. He couldn't name it, but with his teammates and Naruto Uzumaki, he felt content with life for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. That girl is mean, Naruto muttered to himself, looking to himself in the mirror as he had changed into one of outfits Kin had supplied him with, only to frown, as the black condom-looking suit seemed more Sasuke style that, and there was no orange on it. Next. As he began to change, he thought about the event that had taken place when he and the others had entered the clothing shop. The shopkeeper as always glared at Naruto of course, intending to convince his companions to do this another time, only for the three former Odo ninja to each force their own killing intent upon the shopkeeper until he backed down. The strange thing was they didn't ask why the clerk had glared or anything, Kin just dragged him towards the shinobi section, while Dosu and Zaku went to sit down. He wasn't sure how they would feel about the Kyuubi and all as they weren't from Konoha, but he was glad they weren't asking about it at least. Naruto paused, once more looking at himself before smirking at the mirror, that's what I'm talking about. He proclaimed loudly, before opening up the door to the changing room to show Kin, this is awesome. I figured you'd like that one, Kin sighed, before shaking her head with a smirk, at least it's less orange. Naruto's outfit was a regulation black shinobi long-sleeved shirt, similarly designed black pants that ended just an inch above his own footwear. On his hands were fingerless black gloves similar to Kakashi's own, the steel plates on top, each bearing the Konoha leaf symbol like the headband still on Naruto's forehead. The most noticeable addition, however, was the black long-sleeved duster the blonde was now sporting, it being just like the first examiner Ibiki's own, only at the hem of the duster's tail it sported orange flames. Ha, if this doesn't make Sakura-chan like me, I don't know what will. Naruto bragged, moving over to another wall mirror to slip through some poses, Kin rolling her eyes with an amused grin on her face. Yeah, I figured it, you wanted orange, it might as well be on the part you can ditch if stealth is required, Kin reasoned, as the jacket could be shed and put aside in case Naruto ever had to sneak around during a mission. That was the only one like that, so we'll have to get some normal dusters, so I can sew some copies for you. You sew? Naruto asked, pausing in mid-nice guy stance, thumb up at the mirror and everything, only to hold both hands up in forgiveness, as Kin instantly drew a senbon into her hand, sorry, I just didn't think you were the type. It was good training for using my senbon, Kin replied, putting her senbon back with a glare still aimed at the blonde. Alright, I see, Naruto replied, not really, but he didn't want to anger the girl. Oh. Think you could sew this on the back too? He asked hopefully, lifting up his former jumpsuit jacket, pointing to the spiral on the back. Sure I guess, Kin replied with a curious look as she looked over the spiral. Why, is it important or something? Well, kinda, Naruto admitted with a sheepish grin as he rubbed the back of his head. I don't know why, it's just when I look at it, I feel good I guess, I can't really explain it, he informed her, before gaining a light frown. Sounds stupid right? Well maybe, Kin reasoned, giving him a light smirk as he stared at her in surprise, her own right hand reaching back to run through her long hair. Some people just grow attached to things of the past that make them feel good or mean something special is all. Kin informed him only to blush lightly at what she was saying, before aiming a glare at him to cover it up. And now go get more clothes like this so we can go eat. Alright. Naruto yelped, dropping his former jacket to gather more of his new clothing, only to pause to give her a large smile. Thanks Kin-chan. He said before taking off before she attacked him. Kin growled in annoyance at the name, only to frown to herself once Naruto was far enough away. That gaki, she muttered before smiling lightly to herself. I think I understand Dosu's feelings a bit better now. It was nearing noon, the four genin having finished both breakfast and ordered and paid for furniture to be delivered to the apartment building. Naruto and Zaku had been adamant about eating at Ichiraku's again, the two for the first time, seeming to actually get along because of this common goal. After a bit of arguing, Dosu was able to convince the two to save the Ichiraku trip for lunch instead, which the two agreed to much to Dosu and Kin's relief. They found a nice place that the Akamichi clan owned, Naruto surprised to find himself welcomed there, even if a few of the people working there seemed to ignore him mostly. The waiter was luckily not such a person, having merely given Naruto a curious look before asking what they wanted. It wasn't Ichiraku's, but Naruto was planning on going there again at some point. After that they went to various furniture places, Naruto choosing to stay outside as the three went in to order what they needed. This was noticed on the third trip as Zaku ended up staying out with him. They hadn't talked much, though Naruto no longer felt too angry about what the spiky-haired ninja had done back in the Forest of Death, as he did have his arms messed up. From what the blonde could tell, one of Zaku's arms would heal up in a few more days, while the other was really messed up, it having been the one that had almost been blown completely off. Zaku however mentioned the doctors said some Tsunade person could fix him, only that she wasn't in the village anymore. Naruto didn't recognize the name, but offered to help Zaku find her once the exams were done. Zaku merely gave him a curious gaze before shrugging in return. Now the four of them were making their way towards the hot spring and spa they had been instructed to go to. As they arrived, they spotted the Hokage, whom Naruto needed to talk to anyway, about the power and water problem for his three tenants, and Ibisu, who had a serious expression on his face. Both looked surprised at Naruto's new attire, Hiruzen more so as more than ever Naruto looked like another blonde who had been after his title as Hokage. So the closet pervert is training me? Naruto asked Hiruzen bluntly, causing the old man to stifle a laugh, as he was aware of the cause of the nickname, Ibisu to sputter angrily at the nickname, while the three Odo ninjas stared at Ibisu unsurely. Uzumaki-san. Ibisu began, doing his best to recover as he pushed his sunglasses back into place. I am but one of your instructors for this month, as I was assigned to you by Kakashi-sensei, to teach you the fundamentals and work on your chakra control, Ibisu explained, only to raise a hand to silence Naruto, who looked ready to rant his ass off. However, Hokage-sama has accepted my request to train you in ninjutsu as well, so long as you refer to me as Ibisu-sensei from now on, Ibisu said, adding the last bit so he never had to hear that embarrassing nickname for him ever again. Wait, so you're going to teach me actual jutsu? Naruto asked suspiciously, as he had begged Kakashi numerous times to do so, only to be told he wasn't ready to learn any, not stupid things, but actually kick-ass jutsu. Yes, I will be teaching you kick-ass jutsu, Ibisu sighed, glad he was used to such behavior from dealing with Konohamaru. However, before I can teach you any of them, we'll need to get your chakra control up to par. Whatever, so long as I learn something awesome. Naruto agreed with an eager look on his face, salivating at the thought of pulling off some amazing jutsu in front of all the people who'd be there expecting to see Neji win. However, Naruto lost his expression of eagerness as he recalled what Ibisu had said. Wait, what you meant by you being only one hentai? Kin suddenly screamed, the tone of which made Naruto, Ibisu, and even the Hokage jump in surprise, while Dosu just ducked as Zaku did the same with a freaked out look on his face. Kin had instantly pulled a large amount of senbon from somewhere, launching them over by a nearby wall of the hot spring section of the spa. Ow. A voice yelped out, the senbon having pierced into something unseen only for Jiraiya to just appear where they had hit, all of the littering his back as he turned to glare in anger. Which one of you little brats threw those? He demanded, only to blink in surprise to find Kin apparently being the culprit, the Toad Sage, only then realizing Naruto and the three others he'd been waiting for had arrived. Recovering, he cleared his throat before making his way over to join the group, all while reaching around to pull the senbon from his back. Well, allow me to introduce your second instructor. Hiruzen began with an uncomfortable look, well aware his student had never been good with introductions. Naruto, allow me to introduce you to Jiraiya of the Sanin. Great, another pervert, Naruto grumbled, only to notice the three former Odo ninjas staring at the old man in shock, most of all Kin, who looked ready to faint at realizing who he was. What's with you three? Are you retarded? Zaku demanded, once more wondering if that crack about blondes was right on in regards to intelligence. He's Jiraiya of the Sanin, as in Orochimaru's teammate and student of the Hokage. What? Naruto yelped in surprise, staring in surprise at a now smirking Jiraiya, this old fart. Hey. Jiraiya growled, instantly glaring at the blonde before him. What's so hard about believing that? Because a pervert like you couldn't possibly be Jiji's student. Naruto pointed out as if it was obvious. I'm not a pervert. Jiraiya shot back, only to smile proudly while crossing his arms over his chest in a cocky manner. I'm a super pervert. Silence. All three former Odo ninja sweat dropped, each having trouble believing this was the guy who was supposed to be on equal grounds as their former leader. Naruto just looked annoyed as hell, having trouble believing a guy like Jiraiya could possibly teach him anything of value. Ibisu was looking away from the scene, embarrassed for Jiraiya in this case, while Hiruzen just sighed, quite used to his students' claims of being super in the act of perversion. Naruto Hiruzen spoke up, ignoring Jiraiya's annoyed muttering about disrespectful brats and such. Well, Jiraiya is a little eccentric. I promise that he and Ibisu will make sure you'll be more than ready to deal with Niji Hyuga and whoever else you'll be facing in the exam finals. Fine. Naruto relented, trusting the old man on this one as he had yet to steer Naruto wrong, but he better not try perving around while he's supposed to be training me. Don't worry, he won't, Hiruzen informed Naruto, sending Jiraiya a firm stare, making his former student sigh but nod in agreement. Of course, since Ibisu and himself had split the days up, this wouldn't be a problem. He'd just focus on his research beforehand. Now if that's all, Dosu-kun and I have some things to discuss still. Right, Dosu replied with a nod, figuring the Hokage had been there partly to have Dosu come through on his end of the deal. At the same time, Dosu would bring up the problems with the apartment they were having, and perhaps he could get the Hokage to get Zaku some help regarding his heavily damaged arm. As the Hokage and Dosu began heading off towards the cage tower, Jiraiya clapped his hands together, regaining a smile. Alright. Before we start, I figure proper introductions are in order. Jiraiya mused, using this as an excuse to get a proper read on the two remaining Odo ninja, as well as get a better read on Naruto since you three seem to know me. I think it only fair you introduce yourselves as well. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the next Hokage and Konoha's next Chunin. Dadabeo. Naruto instantly responded as he was prone to do, a large grin on his face as he threw a fist up. Jiraiya mused with a forced grin, now quite sure Naruto took more after his mother than his father, before he turned his attention to Kin, whom had regained a light glare aimed at him, and who might this lovely young girl be? Hinsuchi, keep your hands to yourself or I'll rip your arms off and beat you to death with them, Kin informed him bluntly, a senbon held into view just to further prove her point. Well, aren't you a barrel of laughs? Jiraiya asked with a sheepish laugh, before looking her over again with a curious gaze, while not noticing the girl seeming ready to launch some more senbon upon his person. You remind me of a girl I knew, a few of them actually, he mused with a perverse giggle only to yelp as the senbon that had been in Kin's hand stabbed into his knee. Moving on. He forced out, pulling the needle out as he turned to Zaku, and you are? Zaku Abumi, Zaku stated simply, looking quite unimpressed with Jiraiya so far after living with someone like Orochimaru as a village leader for so long, and I don't see how you're even close to being a match for Orochimaru. Believe me, I kicked his ass a few times back in the day, Jiraiya shot back with a light frown, getting a little annoyed at how little these kids seem to think of him. Now, with introductions out of the way, I think it's time we get this show on the road, he began, only to motion to Ibisu, who nodded as he began his explanation. Jiraiya-sama and myself have planned out how best for you to ready yourself, Uzumaki-san, splitting the training between two halves for the day, Ibisu began, raising a finger up as he continued to explain. Starting at 7 in the morning from this day forward, I shall be taking you on for chakra control and ninjutsu training until lunchtime, where you'll get a break period to eat and rest up. After this you shall be training with Jiraiya-sama in regards to your taijutsu, and whatever else he feels will prepare you for the finals. For today, however, we'll be focusing on your chakra control, as the sooner you have a better handle on this, the better you'll be able to manage the training we'll each be giving you. Do you understand? Mostly, though I don't get what exactly Iro Senin here is going to be able to do for me, my taijutsu's already awesome, Naruto pointed out with a frown, only to find 4 identical. Are you serious? Looks being aimed his way, what it is? Not from what I've heard, Jiraiya pointed out, before smirking down at Naruto. Don't worry though, if you do as I teach you, I promise not only will you beat that Hyuga punk down, but you'll win this whole damn exam. But first. Ibisu spoke up before making his way over to the nearest pool of hot spring water, only to walk on top of it to Naruto's amazement. This is the chakra control exercise you will need to complete before I will teach you any ninjutsu. So, it's like the tree walking thing Kakashi-sensei taught us, Naruto reasoned, only to once more earn sour looks from Kin and Zaku. What's with those looks? You're just learning this? Kin asked him with a sigh, shaking her head in disgust. In Odo we learn this before we graduate in case we have a mission on any bodies of water. I swear, got our asses handed to us by a group of genin who don't even know how to water walk, Zaku grumbled, promising himself to step his game up the moment both his arms were functioning properly. He was 2 years older than these brats and how weaker. Well, I'll be learning it now, so there, Naruto shot back with a light glare of annoyance before stomping his way over to the water, only to pause to remove his jacket as he didn't want a chance at getting wet. Alright, here I go. Naruto stated loudly, shutting his eyes as he focused his chakra to his feet just as he had with the tree walking exercise. With a light smirk, quite sure he had this down, he took a step onto the water. Splash. Damn it. Naruto yelped as he jumped out of the water, which was scalding hot as it was a hot spring. Nearby his sensei for the month both smirked lightly at the scene, as any ninja how had they gone through the training would it being on the other side of it for once. Ah, now I see why that bitch Taiya was laughing her ass off, Zaku noted with a laugh at the scene. Well, at least we were given some insensitive for us to succeed faster, Kin giggled in amusement, as Taiya had been instructed to have her summons chase the genin on the water until they could do so as easily as if they were on land. Having some trouble there Gaki? Jiraiya asked with an amused grin as he knelt before Naruto, whom was gasping lightly as he recovered from the hot water he'd splashed in. Shut up. Naruto shot back with a glare, it's just gotten harder to control my chakra after what that Orochi team did to me back in the second exam. Jiraiya instantly lost his grin, a serious expression on his face. What exactly did he do to you? Jiraiya asked. Naruto blinked in surprise at the man's change of tone, before nodding as he stood up, exposing his stomach to Jiraiya, revealing the seal to him. He messed with it quite a bit, Jiraiya noted with a light growl, cursing Orochimaru for doing such a thing to his godson. Can you fix it? Naruto asked hopefully, re-evaluating Jiraiya a little after seeing the man this angry over what Orochimaru had done to him only a little though, as the man was a super pervert after all. Of course, I'm Jiraiya of the Sanin after all. Jiraiya bragged, regaining a cocky grin as he rose to his feet, cracking his knuckles as he pulled his right hand back, but you might wanna brace yourself. What foe? Daju Kain. Jiraiya called out, suddenly slamming his hand forward and his fingers into the seals that had been forced onto Naruto by the snake Sanin from before, Naruto yelping out in pain as he was flung backwards and into the hot water again, and that's how you do it. You stupid hero Sanin. Naruto cursed at the old man as he rose back from the water, pulling himself out onto the shore while fixing his shirt. Not only did that hurt, but you knocked me into the damned water again. Try walking on the water again Gaki Jiraiya challenged with a light smirk, not at all bothered by Naruto's reaction. Naruto glared for a minute more before making his way over to try again. This time he managed to shakingly stand on it, almost dunking in a few times only to manage. Now, what do we say? Thanks Naruto grumbled out, not enjoying the fact he had to thank a guy who just knocked him back into scalding hot water only to yelp as a rock hit him from the side, making him lose his concentration as he dropped in with another splash. Jiraiya instantly began laughing his ass off, looking over at Ibisu with an amused tone. I did not see that coming. He laughed out as Naruto pulled himself out, sending a death glare to Ibisu. The hell was that for? Naruto demanded angrily, having thought Jiraiya had thrown the rock, only to see Ibisu calmly tossing 2 more up and down in his right hand. It's simple Uzumaki. Ibisu began with a grin simply walking on water will not give you the control you'll need to deal with someone like Niji Hyuga, so until you can effortlessly fight on water you're going to miss lunch. But we're going to Ichiraku's at lunch. Naruto whined out, quite afraid of what might happen if he missed out on his favorite meal. Please Uzumaki. Ibisu sighed in annoyance, pausing his tossing of the rocks with the cage bunshin. You'll have no trouble getting this down, more so because of how many you can create. Huh? Naruto asked blankly, not understanding Ibisu's reasoning. How do my bunshin help me here? What? Ibisu began, only to stare at Naruto in surprise, seeing Naruto was honestly confused. Kakashi-sensei didn't teach you. Teach me what? Naruto demanded, the mention of Kakashi apparently keeping something from him really pissing him off. I cannot believe Ibisu began, honestly shocked that Kakashi had never informed Naruto of his greatest learning asset Uzumaki. When a cage bunshin dispels, it sends back all its memories to the original, meaning whatever it learns you learn, to put it simply. Naruto stared before smirking viciously as he formed the familiar seal. I am so kicking Niji's ass. Oh great, Jiraiya sighed dramatically, palming his forehead. We're creating a monster. Over in their area both Kin and Zaku had been watching silently, surprised to have found out that Naruto had been sealed up by Orochimaru in such a way, though both were curious as to what that weird seal on him was about. They'd ask Dosu later, he might know what it meant. However, at hearing about the uses of the cage bunshin, both were watching with stunned expressions. Kin, yeah? I really think we need to start giving Dosu some more respect after this. Apparently they had only been in there a single year spent fighting tooth and nail to live against other children their age, some even younger, in order to prove useful to Orochimaru's goals. Unlike the others however, it was because Dosu, Kin, and Zaku had worked together in order to survive that they had made it out. Dosu was sure he would have made it without the other two well enough, but having them backing him up had its uses in the long run he had discovered. While Zaku was a moron, when it came to battle he would do as Dosu instructed, and the modifications the boy's arms had been given were a boon when dealing with a large group of enemies. Kin, whose modifications apparently had never taken hold, would more than likely have died without her two companions helping her along. She had since grown quite skilled in the use of her senbon, having learned quickly out of need most likely. Other than that she seemed to have some knowledge of first aid as she was able to tend to her own wounds along with her roommates, going as far as to help Dosu bandage his face to a point, though he had never let her or Zaku see exactly what was under said bandages. The year was up and they were now being led away from their cell, all three apparently proving they had what it took to be a Togaku shinobi. What this meant was they were given a room to share, better food, new clothing, a bathroom, and of course the headbands they had just been presented by one of their former jailers. Wear these proudly, but be warned should you screw up even once you wish you never stepped foot outside of that pit. The jailer informed them smugly before handing over a large scroll to each of them. In each of your scrolls you will find the techniques and jutsu Orochimaru-sama has deemed you all fit to know and learn. You will study and implement each one within 3 months' time, or else be punished accordingly. Zaku stated simply, ignoring the glare the jailer was giving him as he looked over the first exercise they would need to do. Where are we supposed to find a tree? Use the wall, the jailer shot back simply. Now if you'll excuse me, I have to start watching over the next batch of brats. Try not to screw up and end up dead, he parted with before leaving the three alone. Well, I for one will not be missing that ass. Kin muttered, her hair having grown since she stopped keeping it short, though it only reached just above her neck at the moment. She had been quite happy to have a bathroom. The first thing she had done was give herself a much needed bath, trim her hair so it at least looked okay, clip the random white hairs that had suddenly began showing, and of course put on her new clothes. And why the heck does my scroll have bells with it? Read and find out, Dosu shot back bluntly, his single eye quickly memorizing the instructions of his melody arm. Didn't think it could do that. He muttered, surprised at what his weapon could do to the water inside a person's body that would have been helpful over the last year. Water walking, Zaku read off before groaning as he dropped onto his behind to sit. At what point are we going to need to learn to walk on water? And that's why you need to learn to walk on water. Zaku finished explaining with a large grin aimed at the soaking wet Naruto. Really any competent ninja would know this. Why are you even here? Naruto demanded, glaring at Zaku who had been sitting comfortably nearby in the same spot for the last few days or so. Why don't you go bother Dosu or Kin-chan? Because Dosu is off training for the final exam and Kin is taking a dip in the hot springs, and after the first 3 times I am not going to risk the loss of my junk just to peek, Zaku explained before regaining his grin, and it's fun watching shades hurl fireballs at you, sadist. It had only been 3 days since Naruto's training under Jiraiya and Ibisu began, the blonde having spammed the hell out of his cage bunshin in order to soak up what he was being taught like a sponge. Even so, when it came to learning to actually fight on top of the water, Ibisu thought it best that Naruto learn it himself, though allowed Naruto's bunshin to begin their training in Naruto's element during this. It had been the first day of official training that Jiraiya had brought in a special chakra paper that showed one's elemental affinity, having even gone as far as to bring extras to test out the Odo Trio's own elements. Naruto had wind, which Zaku of course had as well, while Dosu ended up with earth and Kin strangely enough fire. Due to this, Dosu had asked for admittance into the Konoha library to look up any Doten jutsu that would work with his melody arm style of fighting. Kin didn't care much of this, though had been given permission to use the library as well, along with Zaku, the latter of which didn't see the point until he could actually try anything out, while the former preferred the use of senbon and jinjutsu. Luckily though his less damaged arm had healed enough to let him make use of it, though he'd been told to refrain from trying to use it for training purposes. Of course the moment he got a moment alone with his team, he had Kin knock him out before following the instructions he had on fixing the tube in his arm. It still would take some time before he could use it as well, but at least his weapon wasn't lost to him. Now he just had to make sure to never allow it to get plugged up again, and he'd be good. Naruto's clones had been off trying to split a leaf as his training to better make use of his Fueton element, while the real one continued to fight Ibisu on top of water to fine-tune his control. Dosu himself had found his own private training field while being protected spied on by an Anbu in case any Odo ninja tried anything. Zaku mostly stuck by to watch Naruto get his ass kicked, while Kin would move in between Naruto's training and Dosu's, just to make sure her teammate, while also making use of the training field Dosu, had been given to practice her senbon throwing, and read the Genjutsu scroll she had taken from the library. It was strange to the Odo 3, being able to freely take scrolls containing jutsu and make use of them, as Orochimaru would only let them learn what he wanted them to learn, keeping all the jutsu he himself had listed stored away in a secret place only he and a special few could access. Dosu was making use of it, planning on learning more than some Doten jutsu, as he was planning on training to the point he could one day pay Orochimaru back for his betrayal. Naruto was a little worried in that regard, as whenever he did see Dosu during the last few days, the guy seemed to have exhausted himself to the point he was falling asleep the moment he hit his own bed. Speaking of, with Naruto's Cage Bunshin helping, the Odo trio were now quite happy with their room, more so now that they had power and water. Naruto ended up having his Bunshin bring down the wall to room next to his own as well, giving him much more space, just as his three tenants had. Hey. One of the Bunshin suddenly cried out, all eyes moving onto him as he held up a leaf with a light cut in it. I got it. Disperse. Naruto called out with a large grin, glad to finally be getting somewhere as the large amount of clones poofed out of existence, quickly replaced by more that took over the training exercise, all aware of how to at least tear the leaf now. Ah, I'm so awesome. I wouldn't get cocky. Uzumaki Abisu spoke up with a grin of his own, enjoying the fact his students' jumping abilities would be because of him. The Cage Bunshin tip having been something Naruto really should have been told of though, well, its trigger advancement is incredible, overconfidence can be used against you. Plus that Hyuga seems to have enough confidence for everyone that'll be in the stadium, Zaku added helpfully, Naruto and Abisu having to nod in agreement at that. Of course you can just use that against him. How so? Naruto asked curiously, stepping off of the water to take a break with Zaku, Abisu allowing it, well curious as to what Zaku might have to offer Naruto. Well, the special Jonin still wasn't sure on the 3x Odo ninjas' loyalty, so far they seem surprisingly helpful to Naruto in their own ways. Quite simple, Zaku began with a smirk, as he had dealt with many a people like Niji back in Odo. Tell me something, Blondie, what do you know of the fine art of trash talking? Orochimaru was not a happy snake, his serpent eyes currently narrowed at the two fresh bodies he was being forced to use since the loss of the three genin. When Kabuto had reported the event, he hadn't thought much of it, as the three genin only knew so much about his invasion plans, as he was quite aware they might have ended up captured after their attempt on Sasuke and interrogated. It was why he kept them in the dark over the fact they were allied with Suna for the invasion, along with just how they were going to pull said invasion off during the finals. He however had not expected the three genin to resist his plans for them and go to the Hokage with what they knew. It also didn't help he realized those three were aware of his Sound 5 and the abilities of each one and of the cursed seals that each of his bodyguards bore. Because of this he'd had to replace Aku and Kin with the two pawns. Kabuto had been forced to work along with Kabuto being more than happy to deal with both in order to make it so. Still, Orochimaru was quite aware how muddled his plans were becoming, as the old fool of a Cage knew more than Orochimaru felt comfortable letting him know, all because of three genin. Orochimaru-sama, are you feeling alright? Kabuto asked plainly, a bit nervous at how fierce Orochimaru seemed at the moment, the snake-san and obviously unhappy over the recent events. I'm fine, Kabuto-kun, Orochimaru replied, his voice sounding only lightly strained as he took a seat in a nearby throne-like chair, leaning into it as he tried to think of a way to turn the odds back more into his favor. He'd need an edge, one he had been sure he'd have with Kimimaro by his side beforehand, only to have his would-be future body suddenly hit by an illness even Kabuto couldn't heal him of. If only he could have Kimimaro healed or even had someone of equal strength. Orochimaru's eyes widened just a bit. Kuku, he began to laugh lowly, the vileness in his tone enough to make even Kabuto shiver in response. Kabuto-kun, I have something important I need you to do for me, something that will require speed as I'll need it done before the end of the month. Of course Orochimaru-sama, Kabuto replied, blinking in confusion while wondering what his master was planning. What do you need me to do? First of all, I need you to get me something to write with, Orochimaru informed him, never losing his snake-like smirk. I think it's time Gurin was put to use. Dosu frowned, feeling something was off before pushing it to the side for now as he thought over his current problem. He had finally become aware of his elemental affinity, to no surprise it was earth like most people from his former country. The problem with this however was this gave him no edge over Sasuke, as like most Uchiha he had a fire affinity. Also Dosu realized the few jutsu he realized he could learn within the month would help him in no way deal with Orochimaru, though he also realized he'd have to leave that to the Sandaime. His talk with the Hokage had been a long one. Dosu listed off the abilities of the Sound 4 as Kimimaro was indisposed back in Otagakure. After that he had informed him of the few locations of Orochimaru's bases he and his team had gone to, the Hokage already planning on sending Anbu to those locations in order to raid them for information and to put a dent in Orochimaru's strength. Finally Dosu had admitted to his most recent gain in knowledge the Edo Tensei Jutsu Orochimaru had been planning on using with Kin and Zaku. This had surprised the old Hokage, who once more realized how truly low his former student had fallen. After this Dosu had requested assistance in his training for the month, the Hokage only then having allowed Dosu and his team access to part of the library that genin of Konoha had access to. When Dosu then mentioned assistance for Zaku's still damaged arm, the Hokage had been thoughtful before saying he'd work on something. But that the meeting had finished, Dosu leaving after the Hokage thanked him, which had been weird. Unlike Orochimaru, speaking with the Hokage was something he found himself looking forward to, the old man being easy to talk to and able to put Dosu at ease. Still, Dosu couldn't help but wonder if it was all an act, something to make him and his team trust the old man further so they wouldn't think of betrayal. He and his team had no plans to do that, quite fine with staying in Konoha so long as they were safe and become strong shinobi, but because of that he just couldn't trust the old cage. Dosu? The familiar sound of Naruto called out, Dosu turning to see the blonde rushing over, only to realize it was a Kage Bunshin, as there wasn't a drop of water on him. Boss wants you to come over for lunch with the rest of us, Sanin says you'll want to be here for today's lesson. Dosu blinked at this, having noticed the Toad Sage had been surprisingly curious about the 3 former pawns of his ex-teammate. Though he seemed to get along with Zaku, having introduced the punk to Icha, and he was at odds with Kin, who grew annoyed with his perversions even though Dosu was aware she had a few of the Sanin's book hidden away under her bed, Dosu himself didn't trust him. It was simply for the fact the Sanin was much too interested in Naruto's progress, which struck Dosu as odd. Why Naruto was so close to the Hokage, and why was it Jiraiya of the Sanin would train him, as he'd only trained the Yondaime before. Naruto was a no-name orphan, the blonde having said as much beforehand. More than that, the people of the village loathed him, not outright attacking him, but glaring and speaking to him as if he was lower than dirt. I shall be there shortly, Dosu informed the clone, who nodded before dismissing itself. Dosu rose to his feet, leaving the demolished training ground behind him, making sure to be careful as he stepped out of the crater he'd made as he made his way to the hot springs. He'd have to make a stop by the Konoha library beforehand though, surely the name Uzumaki would lead him to the blonde's family, right? It did after all sound familiar to him, Dosu just wasn't sure why. And then when he starts getting all pissy, throw the balloon at him, Zaku finished instructed with a serious look on his face. Ah. Of course. Naruto agreed, shocked he hadn't thought of it beforehand. You two are morons, Kin bluntly stated, before picking her ramen cup to eat from. Kin had finished her spot treatment the moment she had realized it was almost time for lunch, which meant that Jiraiya would soon be arriving to take over for his half of the day of training. Kin wasn't as anti-pervert as most girls in Konoha seemed to be, so long as they weren't perving over her, she didn't care. Well, unless she knew and liked the girl in question, then she'd castrate the pervert who'd peek. Luckily for Jiraiya though, as Kin didn't like anyone in the village she was now living with outside of her team and Naruto, though she wouldn't admit to such, and none of them was female. The point was she had gotten the hell out of the hot springs before the old pervert decided to make her a character in his next book, which might have been flattering if she trusted him not to make said character like most girls in his books. Kin had left the springs, only to find Naruto and Zaku having a meeting over how best to piss Niji Hyuga off and make the cocky asshole lose his cool. It was a weird thing to bond over, but Kin found the two boys apparently were quite creative in ways to pull such a thing off. She knew from experience that Zaku knew just what to say to anger someone, while Naruto apparently was an annoying prankster. Combined. Kin was quite sure would lead to an enjoyable first round fight. You're just jealous that I and Zaku are awesome, Naruto shot back with a grin, Zaku nodding in agreement with his blonde acquaintance. Before Naruto could continue, he spotted Dosu walking up, the energetic blonde jumping to his feet to call out to the boy, Dosu. Hurry up and have lunch before Sanin shows up. And Naruto eats all the damn ramen. Zaku added, ignoring the annoyed glare the blonde was now sending him as he returned to his meal. I still say we should have eaten at Ichiraku's. Just because you want to stalk Ichiraku-san, Dosu pointed out, taking a seat beside Naruto, as he usually did before grabbing his own untouched ramen cup. As he moved his mouth to move his bandages aside, he noticed Naruto staring intently at him. What? Well, I was wondering why you wear those things actually, Naruto admitted, having held himself back from asking as he was sure there was a reason Dosu did, but he didn't want to push him. Kin and Zaku looked at Dosu, quite aware how he was when it came to his bandages. It had only been an accident that they themselves had seen why he did so, and it had taken him 6 months after to actually talk about it. The story behind it was yet another reason the three had the comradeship they did, though they wouldn't admit to it so not as to be seen as weak. Being weak in Atogakure meant death after all. The point of this was, they were unsure how Dosu would respond to Naruto's curiosity, their mummy of a teammate having grown quickly close to the blonde, and it was obvious they were friends and all but actually admitting to it. It was the same for them however, the 4 orphans each having too much in common not to grow attached. It was only doing to their lives in Odo that left 3 of said orphans unwilling to take the next step, though the moment one did it might just be enough to make the other 2 follow. Naruto Dosu began, using the blonde's name for the first time much to the other 3 ninjas' surprise. I am willing to remove my bandages and explain what they hide, if you're willing to explain why it is the villagers glare and speak to you as they do. An awkward silence followed, Naruto's eyes widening at Dosu's words, as he found himself unsure how to respond. It had been only a few days, but he had quickly grown close to the 3 former Odo ninja as he hoped they did to him. Most of all he was finding in Dosu the kind of friendship he'd always wanted, like Shikamaru and Choji had though obviously different in its own way, as he was quite sure Dosu didn't trust anyone really. Why was that? It couldn't be just because of Orochimaru, could it? Naruto wanted to know, but he didn't want to risk losing his newfound friends because of it. Naruto began, still frowning as he thought it over, about to put it off before he locked eyes with Dosu. There was a look he hadn't yet seen in Dosu's black eye, it was as if he was testing Naruto. For what reason though, unless this was Dosu's way of extending his trust to him, Dosu was willing to trust Naruto if Naruto trusted him. Oh okay, but not till later. Dosu stared for a moment before nodding, inwardly finding himself surprised his offer had worked as it did. Dosu was quite used to secrets being kept from him, such as with Orochimaru for an example. With Naruto the blonde's eyes gave away everything, which for a shinobi would be seen as liability. Yet because of this Dosu knew what Naruto was really thinking or how he felt about something, Dosu quite good at reading other people. The problem of course was the fact Naruto openly expressed his true feelings and reasons, the blonde being the most honest person Dosu had ever met in his life. It was because of this he knew Naruto would tell him later just as he said, and the mystery of Naruto Uzumaki would come to a close. Boy. You better have some for me. The group was pulled from the conversation, finding Jiraiya walking over with a large grin on his face. You're early. Naruto noted in surprise before quickly looking back to Dosu, only to just find him fixing his bandages back over his lips, his ramen cup empty, damn it. Just like Kakashi-sensei. Why is it you have requested us all here, Jiraiya-san? Dosu asked, ignoring Naruto's glare of annoyance at being ignored. I have my own training to go attend to, so this better be worth my time. And the less time I have to spend around your perverted ass the better, Kin followed with, glaring lightly at the now frowning Sanin. And I just don't care, Zaku added as to not be left out, shrugging lightly as he used his good arm to continue eating from his own ramen cup. I really hate you all, Jiraiya grumbled, right eye twitching with anger as he wondered whatever happened to respecting your elders. The point of calling you all here is simple, I've decided to let the Gaki here sign the toad summoning scroll. Why would I want to summon a bunch of toads? Naruto shot back, earning a glare from Jiraiya and looks of disbelief from the ex-Odo nin. I'm guessing I said something stupid again. At least you're learning, Kin mused, the trio having been helping Naruto out from time to time with his lack of knowledge when it came to ninja facts. Being able to sign a summoning scroll is a big deal, Naruto. It's rare for any ninja to even get their hands on one to sign. And even we know that the last Hokage summoned toads, Zaku added, inwardly smirking as Naruto instantly looked excited at the idea of summoning the same sort of animals the Yondaime had. It hadn't taken long for the 3 to pick up on Naruto's fanboy nature for the 4th Hokage, merely mentioning how the man would have done something was enough to get Naruto to do it himself. Of course they only used it to make him train harder and a few times when it was funny to see him do some stupid shit, though that was mostly Zaku. Gimme. 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 Naruto instantly repeated, jumping to his feet as Jiraiya gave him a weird look, not having expected the change in opinion. Yeah, calm down you little nut, Jiraiya laughed, quite happy that Naruto was all for signing with the toads, because toads are awesome, and everyone should know it. Jiraiya lightly bit into his right thumb, just enough to get some blood for the technique. Now, all of you watch carefully to learn the seals for this, Jiraiya instructed, earning confused looks for the Odo 3. Well, I'm only letting Naruto sign the scroll, it's good to learn the seals, should you ever sign one yourselves. What happens if you use it without signing a contract? Dosu asked curiously, thinking over Orochimaru's own snake summons, while mentally copying the seals Jiraiya was slowly running through. Well, when I did it I ended up at Mount Mamboku where I met the toads, Jiraiya said with a shrug as he finished, before slamming his hands onto the ground. Kuchius no jutsu. Jiraiya called out, a set of seals appearing on the ground where his palm had hit, before a large dust cloud filled the area. Once it died down the 4 genin found themselves before a large toad, Jiraiya sitting cockily on its back. So what do you think? Awesome databao. Naruto replied before any of the other 3 could make a crack about the Yondaime's summon being bigger. I gotta get me some of that. Right, Jiraiya laughed lightly, motioning to the toad he was sitting on as it suddenly let its tongue roll from its mouth, dropping a large scroll onto the ground before Naruto. Just open it up and sign your name and blood. Naruto nodded only to frown as he looked up at Jiraiya. Blood. Summons are morbid, aren't they? he asked, Jiraiya just rolling his eyes in response as Naruto lightly bit into his finger to sign his name under a Minato Namikaze. HMPH, snakes are the worst, Dosu spoke up, earning 2 nods of agreement from Kin and Zaku, as they themselves had seen what Manda would do with his victims when summoned. There. Naruto said proudly, looking over his name before rolling the scroll back up, now what? Just go through the seals I showed you, shove a bunch of chakra into the technique, and you're good, Jiraiya explained with a shrug, as he'd learned quickly dumbing things down, made it easier for Naruto to get. Alright then. Naruto stated loudly, dusting his hands off as he got ready to show off, watch and be amazed as I, Uzumaki Naruto, summoning a toad bigger than Sennin's. The 4 other ninja rolled their eyes at this or I in Dosu's case, though they each waited to see Naruto summon for the first time ever. Naruto took a calming breath, biting his other thumb this time as the other had healed up already, before running through the seals as quickly as he could. When finished he slammed his hand into the ground as Jiraiya had, Kuchiyas no Jutsu. Poof. Yo. The small orange toad greeted to the shocked face of Uzumaki Naruto, I'm Gamakichi, give me candy. Then Nani Naruto yelped in surprise, unable to comprehend how he of all people would end up summoning something that small and pathetic. What is this, where's my gigantic amazing toad summon? Wow, amazing there Gaki. Zaku laughed out loudly in response, earning him a glare from Naruto and Gamakichi, the loser summons a loser toad. Ahahaha. Jiraiya meanwhile was smiling proudly, as while it may not look it, Naruto's ability to summon an actual toad instead of a tadpole was impressive. Hell, Jiraiya himself had to practice a month before he could summon a toad of any worth. The Sanin couldn't help but wonder if it was because of all the training they'd gone through the last few days that had something to do with it. Naruto had picked up his wind element quickly, with help of his cage bunshin, and Jiraiya was positive it wouldn't be long until he completed the exercise Ibisu had given him. Jiraiya himself had been helping Naruto's Taijutsu out, though he had made Naruto not to use his bunshin in their spars, though they were allowed to watch. He wanted Naruto to get good on his own, for the better the blonde was without the clones, the better he would be with them in response. Once Naruto was well enough in his Taijutsu, he'd get the brat some weights to help his strength and speed out, knowing if Naruto was going to have any chance at all at not only beating Neji, but being of any help with the Orochimaru situation that Naruto needed to get as strong as possible within the upcoming month. It would be a week from now that Jiraiya decided he would show Naruto how to use the Kyuubi's chakra, because he was quite positive Naruto would need it, more so once all the Orochimaru business was done with and the real problems starting coming along. Jiraiya quickly cooled his face, having caught Dosu's gaze on him. The kid had a good eye, Jiraiya had to admit, and even though he was still a bit unsure about Dosu or the other two, they were growing on him just for the fact Naruto seemed happy with them around. Since Jiraiya had been in the village, he'd not seen Naruto spend time with any other kids his age, not even his own teammates. Of course Sasuke had been smuggled off to who knows where with Kakashi, but Naruto should have at least some friends to hand out with, and he did have them, in 3 unlikely choices at that. It was because of this he had been willing to share the summoning jutsu with the 3, figuring if they ever wanted to have their own summon someday he might as well give them a shot at it. Bet you could never get as cool summons as I have. Naruto's yelled, drawing Jiraiya from his thoughts, finding at some point Naruto and Gamakichi had teamed up to berate Zaku. At least I have Kichi here, you don't have anything but a busted arm. Oh yeah, Zaku shot back with a glare, flinching in pain as he forced his wounded arm up to form a seal. I'll show you, you retarded ass Gaki. Oh shit. Jiraiya managed to get out a moment too late, only then realizing what the moronic genin was doing. Don't finish the Chu. Kuchiyus no Jutsu. Zaku called out before simply poofing away in a cloud of smoke, leaving a group of very confused people. Did he die? Naruto asked innocently, lightly moving his hand around where Zaku had been as if to make sure he was really gone. Zaku, you idiot, Dosu sighed loudly, quite sure wherever Zaku had done would lead to much trouble for himself in the future. Well, with his busted arm he'll most likely die wherever he ended up, Kin reasoned, before frowning at a thought, though knowing him he'll survive and come back just to piss us off again. Jiraiya was both amused and confused at the 3 genins' reactions from the loss of Zaku, though he was mostly just worried at what the Hokage would do when he found out he had anything to do with this. Well, that sucked. Naruto said loudly, quite annoyed that the training for the day had been cancelled, so Jiraiya could have time to come up with an excuse that would save him from his sensei's wrath. What am I supposed to do now? You were doing something. Kin pointed out with a light glare towards the loud blonde, pointing across the training field at where his cage bunshin were still working on the leaf exercise. No, my clones are doing something, Naruto pointed out, using a mocking tone Zaku had helped him come up with earlier that morning. I am just sitting here, on my ass, with nothing to do, so there. I have a wonderful idea, Dosu spoke up from where he was leaning against a tree, a rock in hand that he was using for his own exercise, which was simply to turn the whole rock into dirt. Why don't you both go away so I can concentrate in peace? Unlike you Naruto, I have to do this all on my own. Wait. If you're already practicing jutsu, why is it you're still doing the exercise? Naruto demanded, as he hadn't been taught anything until he could finish the leaf-cutting exercise. Because, well, one can use a jutsu without this sort of training, you have better skill with your element if you're able to complete the basic exercise like this, Dosu explained, guessing his own troubles with controlling his earth element were due to skipping the step he was now going through. Well, he'd rather move through this all as fast as he could, in this case he had no choice but to take the slow path in order to gain the strength needed against Orochimaru. Oh, I think I get it, Naruto said after a moment, nodding lightly before looking to Kin, so where aren't you training? For one, I won't be in the exam finals, Kin replied with a shrug before motioning to the scrolls by her side, and due to my specialty being Jinjutsu, my training involves more mental work than physical. Sounds boring, Naruto mused with a frown, warning a glare that quickly made him flinch back. Sounds hard. A little, Kin replied with a light grin, glad she'd found a male easy enough to scare right off the bat. She had to train Zaku to get that reaction, and she doubted she'd ever get Dosu to cower to her. Then Dosu suddenly spoke up, trying to keep the annoyance from his voice, as their conversation was really making it hard to focus on his task. Perhaps you can show Naruto the sound reading exercise. Ah. That might actually be a good idea, Kin mused, acting as if she wasn't aware of how annoyed Dosu was getting. It wasn't often Kin and Zaku could push their team leaders' buttons like this, yet somehow having Naruto around made it much easier, which was yet another reason Kin and Zaku had grown fond of the blonde. Sound reading? Naruto repeated, frowning at the name of it. How do you read sound? It's not that kind of reading, Kin began to explain, slipping into an instructive tone. It's a technique where you use your own chakra to enhance your hearing to the point of being able to pick up even the lightest of noise. It's something all Odo ninja learn the moment they're counted as a ninja. What will hearing things better do to help me? Naruto asked with a frown, not getting the use of the ability as enhancing hearing wouldn't help him beat Niji. Let me give you an example then, Kin replied, before looking over to Dosu. Hey Dosu. Don't you think, Kin asked, though halfway and she only seemed to move her lips, confusing Naruto greatly, while Dosu just nodded yes to her question, making her smirk in response. But you didn't say anything. Naruto whined, as he hadn't heard a single word leave her mouth. Nope, but the smacking of my lips and movements of my tongue gave away what I was trying to say, the sounds of which Dosu over there has memorized to realize what words I would have been saying, Kin explained with a grin, before shrugging. Lip reading would do the same I suppose, but this is just an example as there's much more use for it. So what did you ask? Naruto wondered, second-guessing his thoughts on the skill being offered to him. If I thought Zaku was a moron, which he is, Dosu replied simply, Kin quite pleased to see Naruto laughing in response to her example. To think he'd let you drive him into using that technique. I only hope wherever he ended up he won't be back for a long time. Why yeah, or that at least he brings back some gifts, Naruto said as he recovered, still smiling playfully though. Alright Kin-chan, tell me how to do this thing. Alright, here's how you do it. It had been 3 days since then, and there was still no sign with Zaku, which was actually making the 3 genin a bit worried, though only Naruto himself would voice this as the other two knew better. The moment either said anything about actually caring about Zaku, the other would never let them live it down, and Zaku would return and hear all about it from the other party, and then he would never let said person live it down. It was a strange system, but it had happened a few times over the years, and they had learned not to let it happen ever again. The Hokage had given Jiraiya an earful, as the Sanin should have warned the genin from using the technique until they were skilled enough to survive whatever tests the summons might put them through. After hearing this, Naruto of course asked what tests Hiruzen meant, which led to the Hokage having more to yell at Jiraiya about, as he should have at least told Naruto about what he had to do to become a true summoner of the toads. Once he calmed down, the Hokage explained that once Zaku failed whatever test he was given, he would most likely just be sent back, unless his summons were like the snake summons, then he'd most likely end up dead. Zaku would be missed as no one could see him pulling off whatever test due to his busted arm and the fact everyone knew he was well weak without his air cannons. It was another day of training for Naruto, the blonde having only just completed the leaf-cutting exercise the day before, so today was all about learning some Futon jutsu from Ibisu. Naruto of course was bouncing up and down on his heels as he waited for Ibisu to begin the lesson. Alright Uzumaki, listen closely as I will now teach you the first wind element technique you'll need to learn. Ibisu began his instruction, enjoying as always how eager Naruto seemed to listen to him. This technique however, does not involve hand seals, merely using your Futon element and chakra to pull off, Ibisu explained, before pointing to a nearby rock but 10 feet away. Now Uzumaki, I myself cannot do this, but I've seen it done by another Futon user in the village, so use what you learned through your exercise, fire it off from your palm. Alright then, Naruto replied, looking a bit unsure as he aimed his right palm, just as he'd seen Zaku do with his own weapons. Naruto then recalled the way he used his chakra to cut through the leaf perfectly, molding his chakra in the same way before releasing it from his hand. Similar to Zaku's own attack, a burst of wind hit the rock, leaving a fist-sized indent into the stone, an inch deep. "Alright. I'm the greatest. This technique is the Kazugama no Jutsu," Ibisu explained, moving over to look over the indent Naruto had caused. "While it seems effective, realize that it was only because you used more chakra than most people would. With this technique you gained this result, as most people would only be able to do the same damage a punch would pull off." "Hence I'm the greatest," Naruto replied with a shrug, knowing he'd surprise Sasuke with his cool new jutsu, more so because he didn't even need to use hand seals to pull it off, so Sasuke couldn't copy it. "What's next, Ibisu-sensei?" "I wanna learn how to make a tornado." "Uzumaki, until you've completely mastered this technique we won't be moving on," Ibisu replied, earning a look of annoyance from Naruto. Now, with your bunshin, you should have no problem doing this. Besides, once you're able to use this technique in a matter of seconds, imagine how easy it should be for you to deal with anyone expecting a jutsu involving hand signs. It also will help, as the more you train the further away you'll be able to use such a technique." "Wait, so the closer I use this thing the more damage it does?" Naruto asked, noticing he was 10 feet from the thing. "So if I used it on a person up close? Depending on who it is you could very well do some major damage," Ibisu admitted, quite sure any civilian would die from the strength Naruto was able to flood into what was supposed to be a basic Futon jutsu. Asuma had explained it to Ibisu so he could teach it to Naruto, Asuma having used it to increase his range with Futon jutsu and would later forego it as he learned to flood his own Futon element into his weapons to make them that much more effective. "Now, get to work." "Right," Naruto replied, quickly spamming the area with clones as he made them get to work. It was just Naruto and Ibisu today, as Dosu was busy at his own training field, Kin was out buying more senbon to resupply herself, and Zaku of course was who knows where. So far it was a week into the month, with just 3 more to go until the exam finals, and Orochimaru made his move. Ibisu found himself a bit worried, unable to push aside the sense of foreboding he was feeling involving the finals and what it might bring. As he watched Naruto though, he couldn't help but feel more at ease though, as if the blonde continued at this pace, he could very well be Jonin level within the year. Ibisu was a bit jealous though, knowing after the exams that Kakashi would once more take over Naruto's training, though he was sure Jiraiya would continue to teach the boy. Ibisu had quickly grown fond of Naruto, and by teaching him he now knew how to deal with Konohamaru. Once the day came, he could take the boy as part of his own genin team. "Uzumaki Naruto," Ibisu thought to himself with a smile on his face, watching Naruto use his recently learned jutsu to blast a clone point blank in the face. "I was wrong about you, and I can only hope what little I teach you this month will help you let you one day reach the title you're so eager to claim one day." Poof. Ibisu blinked, turning to his right only to find a face-down Zaku groaning on the ground. "Ayabumi-kun." Ibisu yelped in surprise, having heard of what the punk genin had done so foolishly 3 days prior. "Zaku," Naruto called out in surprise, before rushing over to check on his recently gained companion friend. "Dude, we thought you were dead." "Well, at least me and Kin-chan, Dosu said you had to be dead. I hate you all 3 of you." Zaku groaned from the ground, before pushing himself up, a smirk coming to his lips. "And now I have a way to eventually kick your asses and make you regret ever insulting me." "Zaku, did you just use your arm?" Naruto asked in surprise, looking down to find Zaku's arms, both of them, perfectly healed. "But how?" "It's simple, Gaki," Zaku said, looking unsure if he should explain for a moment before letting out a sigh. "Chickens, fucking chickens." Somewhere, Zaku had realized within moments of ending the seals he had messed up. Zaku blinked in surprise, looking back and forth around the cornfields. He had landed in the middle, only it was more like a forest due to how high the damned corn stalks were. Okay, apparently the old fart was right. Zaku mused to himself before looking left then right then finally just picking to go left. "Dosu's gonna give me shit over this, I know it." It took what seemed like hours to get out of the weird forest, but Zaku found himself in what seemed to be a massive field of grass. In the distance he noticed what seemed to be an old temple, only with what seemed to be pipes running around and through it and smoke rising from the top. As Zaku tried to figure out just where the hell he ended up, he heard a sound he hadn't heard since joining up with Orochimaru. "Baka." Zaku blinked before slowly looking down only to find a small black rooster staring back up at him. It wasn't so much the fact the rooster was looking at him like he was a moron, reminded him of Dosu in that way, but the goggles hanging around the thing's neck that made him realize the bird was most likely the summon for this place. "Great, of all summons I end up with poultry." Zaku groaned, slapping a hand to his forehead. "Poultry, Baka?" the rooster demanded in a gruff voice that just didn't fit the small bird, its eyes narrowed in annoyance of Zaku's words. "Yeah, I'm gonna fuck you up. Eh? Tori who? Boom. Rooster cannon?" Dosu had to ask, staring at Zaku as if only then realizing just how stupid his team member truly was, to go pissing off an unknown summon of all things. "He really defeated you with an attack called Rooster Cannon? That is hilarious." Naruto piped in from his seat nearby Dosu, both watching Zaku look at them in annoyance. I mean, first it's getting your arm blown off by insects, now it's getting your ass handed to you by chickens. He was a rooster. Zaku yelled in anger, which of course only made Naruto laugh harder. Yeah, laugh now, but once you see these guys in action, you'll learn why I'm trying so hard to earn their favor. It had been a few days after Zaku had returned, the genin instantly was forced to the Hokage's office to explain what had happened, as well as to get an earful on why he should have never done what he did. After that he was sent to the hospital to look over his arms and make sure they had been repaired properly. Not only were they in tip-top shape, but his chakra coils were working just fine. Also, now that Zaku was apparently fit for training, he was doing what he could to increase his chakra in order to be able to summon any of his new summons, all while also trying to get down a few jutsu they had imparted to him to, in their words, make him less of a worm. Needless to say, Zaku seemed to have gained a measure of respect for his summons, if only because they kicked his ass around after healing him up. So what happened after that? Kin had to ask, having given up reading over her Jinjutsu scroll after laughing over Zaku getting blasted by a chicken of all things. Well, I woke up in that temple and Banjiro, that asshole rooster I was talking about, explained that the Tori and Ondori clans apparently don't take kindly to insults. Zaku informed them, recalling the ranting rooster who could have given Taiya a run for her money insult-wise. They were quite interested in my arms, my arm cannons apparently being similar to something they make. Dosu piped in curiously, wanting to know more on Zaku's summons, so he could better plan how to make use of them, should the need come up. Hard to believe, but the little bastards are engineers. Zaku replied with a light smirk, holding his right palm towards the three genin, showing a covering over the cannon. See, they added a little slot to let me open and close the damn things, so no more bugs sneaking in. I doubt you'll ever fight Shino again, so why? Both Naruto began to ask, only to pause as Zaku aimed both palms at him. I mean, that's smart. Really smart. Good. Zaku growled, before letting his arms hang to his side as he returned to his current exercise standing on a leaf on water. It was a mix of the leaf balancing and water walking exercise that the Tori and Ondori taught him. Apparently if he could pull it off for a set amount of time he'd have an easier time pulling off the very move that sent him flying. He wouldn't be counted as a proper summoner until he got it down, and he liked the idea of blasting air from his mouth in the same manner he could his arms, so he didn't mind. Adding in the fact it would help him raise his chakra pool to the level of being able to actually summon, and he was sold on the idea. By the way, how'd that talk of yours go? Zaku asked, aiming the question at Dosu. Well, he noticed Naruto look away when he did. Well, Kin just looked annoyed, letting Zaku know she had no idea what had happened during Naruto and Dosu's talk. It was informative. Dosu replied, speaking in the tone Zaku had long learned meant if he asked any more his ass was grass. Zaku just rolled his eyes, figuring if it was anything important Dosu would have told him or Kin. On second thought he'd just keep it to himself, mummy bastard. Ibisu never spoke much of the team he'd been placed on as a genin, mainly because a part of him had felt a bit embarrassed at how far the others in his generation had gone compared to himself. The fact he'd been in the same class as legends like Kakashi Haddock and Asuma Sarutobi wasn't the sort of things people just take at face value after all. For instance, as time went on he'd grown further apart from his former team members, his own career taking much of his focus where eventually he'd even been allowed to tutor the Hokage's grandson, something he'd been quite proud to do. Now here he was, waiting to meet with one of his former genin cell members, all to request some assistance and hopefully patch a few things up. Ibisu, the cool tone of Shiranui Genma, the young jonin standing out with his ever-present senbon sticking out of his mouth and a plain expression on his handsome face, wanting to know why he'd been called out like this. He wore the normal attire of a jonin, the bandana on his head being the only other thing to stand out on his person. Been a while, how are things? Well, I've been better I suppose. Ibisu replied, a light smile on his lips, pushing off the tree he'd been leaning against to close the distance between himself and Genma. He froze as an uncertain look came to his face, unsure how to go about doing this before bowing as low as he could, causing Genma to raise a brow in surprise. I apologize for what I said back then. I know now I was completely wrong about Uzumaki-san, and I had no right to speak of him in such a way. Genma stared for a bit, making sure this was happening before lightly bonking Ibisu on the back of the head, making his old friend hold his head as he stood back up straight, glaring at Genma for the act. It took you long enough, but I suppose even the Lord of Test Scores can get something wrong, Genma joked lightly, as Ibisu had basically been the Sakura of their year. Ibisu continued to glare for a bit before just sighing, lowering his arm from the back of his head as a light smile returned to his face. Yes, well, I suppose as our third would say. I've been unyouthful when it came to Uzumaki-san, Ibisu joked in return, both men of course speaking to Mito Guy, the third member of their genin cell. Don't go there, Genma informed Ibisu with a half smile, as even after years of knowing Guy he still didn't get the man's obsession with being youthful as he put it, so, mind explaining what brought on this apology? Don't hear from you in 3 years really and then you call me out like this. I'm guessing this has to do with Kakashi wanting you to teach the kid, does it? Ibisu nodded, noting the frown that returned to Genma's face at the mention of this, knowing full well the reason. When the third exam finalists had been decided, Genma had offered Kakashi to teach Naruto for the month, only to have been denied as Kakashi had already had something planned. Of course, this was before he'd even asked Ibisu to help Naruto with his fundamentals. Genma obviously was a bit ticked at being ignored in this way, Ibisu unsure as to why. However, though Genma always seemed to always been one of the few looking out for Naruto's well-being through the years. It was this fact that had caused the argument that led to himself and Genma going separate ways, as it were. Hokage-sama has changed things up with regards to Uzumaki-san's training, Ibisu began to explain, Genma once more raising a brow in surprise. Jiraiya-sama is assisting me in training Uzumaki-san for the upcoming Chunin exams. Good, the kid needs all the help he can get to beat guys brat, Genma replied with a pleased tone, having not even been aware Jiraiya was back in the village yet. So was that it, or is there something you'd like to ask me? Yes, there's more, Ibisu admitted with his usual smirk, lightly pushing his sunglasses back into place. I have also gained some tag on students, one of which seems to be a quite well-off senbon wielder who could use some pointers. Genma blinked, wondering what genin he knew of that used senbon, unable to think of a single one in Konoha that did. There was guy's student Tenten, whom he'd actually given pointers already, when it came to senbon and a few other weapons he knew how to use, so that was out. Then of course he let his mind wander a bit, didn't someone in the exams use senbon? Oh right, it was that Odo. Okay, explain to me how that happened, Genma said with a frown, realizing somehow Ibisu had been placed in charge of the village's newest genin. Must it always be Ichiraku's? Dosu asked with an annoyed tone, walking besides Naruto as he, the blonde, and Zaku made their way towards the location of the ramen shack in question. Dosu did enjoy the place, both Tucci and Am were surprisingly kind to himself and his teammates after all. The problem was they went to the ramen shack way too much. Dosu himself preferred the Akimichi-ran restaurant they had gone to only once. Sure, the Akimichi just seemed to treat them as normal customers, but at least they offered something other than ramen on the menu. Hey, I haven't been there in what seems like an eternity, so screw you. Zaku shot in retaliation, reminding them he'd been away from Ichiraku's, one in particular, since his small trip to the land of chickens. It was still unsure if Zaku was just crushing on Am Ichiraku or he might actually like the girl in question. The three others in the strange foursome currently had a bet placed on how things would end in regards to this building relationship. Of course by now the question of where Kin was during this enlightening conversation over the pros and cons of eating at Ichiraku's was. Quite simply, the only girl of the group had thought ahead and made herself a lunch so as to continue her own training right after. Still can't believe Kin would choose a bento over some real food. Food of the gods. Naruto instantly chimed in, the words being appropriate follow-up in his mind as ramen was amazing in all ways, except for how long it took to cook, the wait was unbearable. Dosu gave up at this point, giving both grinning boys who bumped their fists together his usual deadpan stare before letting out a sigh, quite sure he was the only one who had to deal with two annoyances like this in the entire village. It was times like this he was glad Kin was around, even though she was the weakest she at least had some working brain cells in her head, not that he'd ever inform her of this fact, didn't needing her getting a big head over it. Tell me Zaku, what did you eat there anyway while you were with them? He said suddenly and looked over at him. I doubt they had the kind of food you prefer, so odds are you had to eat like a rooster does. He said, and if his bandages weren't in the way you could see a grin on his own face. What are you getting at? Zaku asked him, turning a sharp eye on him. Oh, you know, figured you'd eat the same things that a rooster eats. You know, dirt, pellets, birdseed worms. Why you? Zaku shouted, ready to wring his throat. Oh come on, knock it off. Naruto said as Dosu chuckled at him. Naruto. The group froze, turning to their right to find the glaring form of one Ino Yamanaka and a confused and surprised-looking Choji Akimichi, who looked to have been seconds from eating a chip from the bag held in his right hand. The blonde Yamanaka stormed over in a huff before pointing an accusing finger in the face of a very confused Uzumaki. What are you doing with them? Great, Dosu said dryly, seeing where this was headed. Ino. What's the matter? Naruto asked the upset blonde who had her finger jammed in his face. Ino glared at him in disbelief. What are you thinking? Walking around with likes of them? She said angrily at him, who annoyingly batted her hand out of his face. I'm walking here, what? It's against the law to walk in the village without your permission. Zaku said dryly to her. Ino huffed and folded her arms across herself. Miserable punk. I thought you left after Sasuke-kun broke your arms and Shino kicked your ass. She said to Zaku, who glared at her. Enough, Zaku, Dosu said, stepping forward before he could respond. It's time we go, the last thing I want is for you to get into another fight. Ah, you. Choji said, his eyes lighting up in flames as he ate his last chip and threw away the bag. I underestimated you before, but this time I can beat you. He said, remembering his defeat at the hands of him. Dosu looked at him and smirked under his bandages. I'm not in the mood to fight, but if you insist I suppose I can defeat in the same amount of time it took me before Fatso-san. He taunted, remembering how insulting him was the easiest way to beat him. Would you call me? Chaoji said angrily. I'm big boned, you mummified weirdo. Cut it out, all of you. Naruto said, and he stepped forward as they were seconds away from going at it. Come on guys, let's go. We're late as it is and we gotta pick up groceries after we eat. What the? Ino said, looking at him in surprise, and so did Chaoji. Naruto. What are you doing hanging with them? She asked him in disbelief that he would be hanging out with the likes of them. It'd be like a rose deciding to hang out with a patch of weeds in her opinion, as both she and Chaoji looked on confused. Dosu and Zaku along with Kin-chan are my friends now. They're helping me train for the exams and the fight against Niji. Naruto responded to them. What? Both of them shouted at him. Naruto, are you crazy? Chaoji exclaimed at him. I knew you were a Nimrod, but I didn't think you were that stupid. Ino shouted at him and he frowned at her words. How could you possibly want to be friends with the likes of them? What's the big deal? They're my friends now. Naruto responded, frowning over the way they were acting. Naruto, I know you was unconscious during what happened, but they tried to kill you, remember? Chaoji said to him. At the Forest of Death they would have killed you, Sakura and Sasuke if we hadn't done anything. They showed no hesitation over attacking you and would have killed you without blinking an eye. I know that. Naruto said to him. Then what are you doing going around being friends with them? That guy over there pounded and beaten Sakura, don't you recall? If Sasuke hadn't waken up they were going to kill all of us. Ino said to him, not understanding him. TCH, look at them talking as if we aren't even here. Zaku said in disgust to Dosu. They were on a mission, they had been ordered to kill Sasuke, we would have done the same thing if we was in their spots. Naruto said to them as Ino threw her hands up in the air in disbelief over his foolishness in her eyes. Give me a break, Naruto. I can't believe you'd be dumb enough to try and become friends with them. Ino chastised him. Next you're going to try and become friends with Mizuki. Naruto gritted his teeth at her words. Now hold on. That's an entirely different matter, Ino, and you know it. He snapped angrily at her, surprising them as they hadn't seen him get so mad so fast before. What is going on here? A voice said, and the group turned and saw Shikamaru Nara walking towards them, an annoyed look on his face. I could hear you all from the other side of Konoha with the racket you was making. He said to them. Good that you're here, Shikamaru. Ino said to him as he stood beside them. Talk some sense into Naruto, he's decided to become friends with the same people who tried to kill us. She said, mentioning to the hunched over figure and the scruffy looking thug. What? Shikamaru said, looking confused, and looked over at Naruto standing beside them. Troublesome, he muttered as he knew he shouldn't have bothered waking up from his nap to examine what the voices were. He was glad at least that one girl who was with them who he thought wasn't there with them, she was a pain. And he was scheduled to fight the bandaged figure standing across from him as well in a couple weeks. HMPH, it's the exams, Blondie, we're free to walk around here as we please. Zaku said to Ino. I'm not talking to you, I don't associate myself with riffraff. She said, turning her nose up in the air. Stuck up prissy bitch. Zaku muttered under his breath. Come on guys, stop it. Naruto said, trying to be the peacemaker between them as a crowd was starting to watch from afar. The last thing he wanted was a crowd to get involved and make things worse. Enough of this, Dosu said, shaking his head, having grown tired of the fight they was having. Come on, let's head back home. I've lost my appetite. He said to Naruto and Zaku and went to leave. Team 10 watched them and Ino scoffed and crossed her arms across her chest. Disfigured creep. She spat out as he went to leave. A shame they didn't take your life when they took your face. Dosu flinched suddenly and brought a hand up to his bandaged side of his face at her words, his eyes shut, surprising them. Slowly painful memories came back as he remembered a small child being laughed and taunted out due to the scars he had over his face, even making fun of and insulting him when he covered them up in bandages. He then slowly turned around. I guess this place isn't the paradise I heard it was founded as. I guess there is no place anywhere for a disfigured child in society. He said and walked away. Dosu, wait. Zaku said, chasing after him, who had leapt up onto the roof and dashed off. Naruto watched them go and turned to face the three. I can't believe you would say such things. Naruto snapped, turning at Team 10, especially at Ino with anger in his eyes. You have no right to talk about that. He yelled at them. What is your problem? Ino asked, confused over how upset he was getting. That's my problem. Naruto shouted at her. You have no right to treat Dosu the way you did, Ino. Naruto, calm down. Shikamaru said to him, seeing how angry he was getting. It's not my fault if he's some sort of disfigured freak. Ino said with a huff. Shut up. Don't say another word. Naruto shouted, getting up in her face, surprising her, and made her take a few steps back. I can't believe you guys would say such things about him. Or Zaku or Kin. He said, breathing angrily. Naruto, they tried to kill us. Shikamaru said to him. You can't tell me they wouldn't have tried to kill you as well. Yeah, if Sasuke hadn't waken up who knows what would have happened back in the forest. Choji said to him. That doesn't matter now. They're my friends now and I thought you guys were my friends too. He said, surprising them. You don't know what happened to them, what happened to any of them. You have no idea what Dosu or any of them have gone through. How'd you like it, Choji, if everyone mocked you everywhere you went? He said angrily at Choji, who went to say something but stopped and looked down at the floor, not answering. Naruto cooled down. It's just that, well, a tiger can't change its stripes, you know. It's hard to trust someone who tried to kill you. Shikamaru said to him. For all we know, they are going to murder you in your sleep if they get the opportunity. How do you know that they aren't taking advantage of you? They could be using you for information to try and kill Sasuke again, and once they do they'll kill you as well, so you won't get in the way. I know that, but I made the effort and I know deep down they're good people. They just had a lousy childhood growing up and now they got a second chance. Naruto responded, upset over their accusations. I trust them with my life. He said, and then turned and looked at Ino, his sharp eyes penetrating her, holding her in place. Ino, for someone who always treasures beauty, you've proven that you aren't. What are you talking about? She said, not understanding. The way you act, how you look down at others, how you treated Sakura before when you was young and how you treated Dosu just now. You may think you're beautiful, but as far as I'm concerned, you're the ugliest person in the world with how you act. He said, shocking her with his words, and he then turned and left, leaving a stunned Team 10 behind who could only watch on in silence as he walked away. Ino in particular was thinking about what he had just said. As that was happening, Tsuchi wasn't a happy camper at the moment, her eyes narrowed at the tree covered in her senbon. The reason for her unhappiness was aimed at her own shortcomings compared to her teammates. In the test she'd barely managed to do a thing, and now Dosu was jumping forward in skill, being given the access to abilities Orochimaru had denied them for so long, letting Dosu reach his full potential, while even Zaku was working to have actual summons, along with the returned use of his arm cannons. Rin let out a depressed sigh as she looked down at the senbon in her hand, giving it a light twirl before tucking it behind her ear as she dropped into a sitting position. She was quite proud of her skill with senbon given her age, but any advanced techniques had been denied to her, and apparently in Konoha, you had to be a chunin in rank or studying to be a medanin to check out the advanced skills in senbon use. In jutsu-wise, she relied on the bell she could attach to her senbon, yet that was for one of the few jutsu she'd been allowed to learn back in Atogakure. All in all, she was the weak link in her team and she knew it, hence why she was unhappy. What she would do to have Zaku around to vent her frustrations out on. Hey. A familiar voice called out to Kin, making the unhappy girl turn her head to find a glaring Sakura behind her. We need to talk now. Kin thanked Kami for giving her this oh so wonderful gift of venting and would be sure to thank Kami again for her kind offerings of the pink-haired weakling. Wow, are you always so demanding? Kin asked with a mocking grin, jumping back to her feet as she dusted her pants off before turning to the glaring Sakura. It's a wonder you're a shinobi, the profession requires silence, and stealth pink hair and a loud mouth don't exactly work with that. I don't want to hear anything like that from you. Sakura snapped angrily, before pointing an accusing finger at Kin, who just blinked in curiosity. I just came to tell you to stay away from Naruto. You and your team are obviously just using him to get to Sasuke-kun, and I won't allow you to do that. Kin stared, looking quite bored with the situation. Yeah, we really don't give two shits about the Uchiha prick, so try again, Pinky. Kin shot back with a shrug. We're hanging out with Uzumaki for our own reasons, so why don't you go back to being useless while I find somewhere quieter to train? Kin suggested as she turned her back to Sakura, moving to collect her senbon from the tree. Don't give me that, of course you're using Naruto to get at Sasuke-kun. Sakura snapped at Kin, anger taking hold at the way the black-haired girl was just turning her back to her. Why else would you want to hang around Naruto of all people? Kin paused, before slowly turning to give Sakura a cold look. What exactly does that even mean? Kin asked as she turned to face Sakura again, sliding the senbon she recovered into her holster for them. What exactly is hard to believe about my team being close to Uzumaki? Other than the fact you and your team tried to kill my team? Sakura asked with a mocking tone of her own. Then it's because no one willingly gets close to Naruto. He's loud, obnoxious, and an idiot. Sure, he's an okay ninja, and he has a few nice points to him, but he's got nothing on Sasuke-kun. Sakura began listing off, figuring if she listed off enough faults the girl would come clean with her. Plus it always felt nice to vent her frustrations out on the blonde, even if he wasn't around, and her lack of Sasuke lately was getting to her, since a certain sensei had swiped him off to who knows where. The only reason I can even tolerate his presence half the time is because I'm used to him being on his team and all, so why don't you tell me the truth? Sakura froze at that, looking to her now cut cheek, the skin of which had been ripped open by the thrown senbon of Kintsuchi. Sakura was surprised to find Kin glaring at her, unsure why exactly, as all she'd been doing was talking about Naruto, or was she trying to act upset over this? To somehow prove that she actually cared about Naruto? Ha. Sakura wouldn't be so easily fooled. You really are a useless bitch of a fangirl, aren't you? Kin asked coldly, pulling the senbon from her ear to hold ready to use as Sakura slipped into a defensive stance. That stupid blonde may not be the brightest bulb, but he's sure better than you or that Uchiha punk, Kin stated firmly. Thinking back to her time spent with the blonde and her teammates, she'd never seen someone get along with Zaku so well, and more than that Dosu had been happy, though he'd never admitted, if not for Uzumaki, if not for Naruto. Kin stumbled over her words, knowing she had to keep quiet about her team's turn over to the Leaf Village's side. I don't have time for this, and you know what? You keep the hell away from Naruto from now on. I don't care if he's your teammate, I don't care if you think you're his friend, because you're obviously not. Stick to your Uchiha and back the fuck off. Sakura stared in shock, wondering who the hell Kin thought she was. Why you? Sakura growled as her anger only grew tipped off as Kin once more turned her back to her. Without thinking, Sakura charged in, swinging a punch to the back of Kin's head with the same force she'd usually reserve for Naruto. She wasn't expecting Kin to not only dodge the attempt, but to grab her wrist and bend Sakura's arm behind her back. That was stupid, Kin told Sakura coldly, gripping on Sakura's arm as a cold smirk came to her lips. However, thanks for giving me the excuse to pummel on you until I feel better about myself. Before Sakura could react, she twisted her arm, causing her to cry out. She used her other arm to try and hit her, but Kin dodged it and elbowed her in the back. Let go. Sakura shouted, trying to get free from her seemingly iron grip. What happened to that fire you showed in the forest? Did you use it all up knocking yourself unconscious against that blonde? Kin taunted her, her smirk turning into a grin. Why you? Sakura shouted and slugged her free arm backwards, aiming at her face. Kin dodged it easily and kicked her in the rear, sending her staggering forward and colliding against a tree. She turned around and was surprised to see Kin in front of her and delivered an open palm thrust, smacking her across the face. Sakura winced at the stinging feeling of the blow. God, you're weak, how did you manage to get to become a ninja anyway? Kin said to her, disgust in her voice. Is the best hair how you people determine who becomes kunoichi? Sakura glared at her and charged her, throwing fists at her. Kin, despite taijutsu being a skill she didn't excel at, was able to dodge and parry and block her attempted punches and kicks. Sakura continued to swing wildly at her, throwing in kicks as well. Kin dodged them and backflipped into the air and threw a senbon at him, which hit her in the shoulder area of her shirt, just missing flesh. Suddenly the pincat heard a ringing sound. She looked and saw that a bell was attached to it. Oh no. She thought, remembering her match against Shikamaru, as Kin, a chakra string attached to it activated her genjutsu, and the bell began ringing louder. Sakura clutched at her head as she felt it pounding into her head. She looked ahead and saw that Kin created multiple copies of herself, smirking at her. Using all her strength, she ran and threw a fist at one, hoping hit a real Kin, but it passed right through it, and the real sound kunoichi jabbed her in the stomach, knocking her backwards. Sakura clutched at her head as the ringing got louder and felt ready to faint when it stopped all of a sudden. She then felt the senbon was pulled out of her and returned to Kin, who caught it and put it back in its holster, sending the copies away. All too easy, she said and smirked arrogantly. Now you know the pecking order. She said and turned and started to walk away. Sakura watched her leave and gritted her teeth at how she had humiliated her just now. She wouldn't let her stand for that. Kin, not paying attention, did not notice Sakura getting to her feet, fire and determination in her eyes as she felt renewed strength appear inside her. She then ran after Kin, who unaware of her until the last second when she heard her and turned around.